As she dressed, she asked why I wanted to retain the wounded soldiers specifically. I couldn't admit my deep insecurity in this strange world. Commanding more soldiers was my only way to find peace. I told Calixichoya, the road home is long and treacherous. It's safer and more effective to command these men myself than to let others lead them. Calixichoya saw my ambition and confidence. For a moment, my face mirrored Cyrus the Younger's, chilling her. She stepped forward and embraced me tightly. Sensing her distress, I asked, "What's wrong?" She whispered, "When we return to Greece, what do you intend to do?" "I haven't fully decided," I replied, though I had been contemplating it. "But one thing is certain. Wherever I go, you go with me." Calixichoya pressed her face against my shoulder, feeling my rough skin. "I will follow you anywhere," she vowed, then added firmly. "But you must not return to Asia Minor." "Why?" I asked, surprised. "Because it will be a battlefield," she warned. I heard Cyrus say. Seeing my calm expression, she continued, "Sparta and Tissaphernes are deeply at odds, and Sparta is entangled in this Persian rebellion. Now that Tissaphernes has returned to Asia Minor, he will surely target Sparta. Sparta is the leader of the Greek city-states and claims to protect those in Asia Minor, yet they secretly agreed to cede those lands to Persia for support. They've stalled on this promise, and Cyrus never pressured them. Now, with a new king, Tissaphernes will force them to comply." I realized the gravity of the situation. If Sparta complied, they would be branded traitors, losing their prestige and risking rebellion. If they refused, war was inevitable. I pondered if Clearchus's recent overtures were merely to recruit me. I then asked, "If I avoid Asia Minor, will you still return to Miletus?" "I told you I would follow you," she said, her expression dimming. "Besides, returning now would only bring disaster upon my family." I understood. As Cyrus's concubine, she was a relative of a rebel, and her return would draw the Persian authorities to her family in Miletus. "Don't worry," I comforted her. "One day, I will ensure you return home with honor." Calixichoya looked at my earnest face, her gloom lifting. "I believe you." She pulled her veil over her head. "Since you've put me in charge of the medical camp, I'm exercising my authority. I am freeing those female slaves so they will care for the wounded with more dedication." "That is your right, though I must inform Mersis." 3 days later, the army broke camp. By afternoon, Tissaphernes arrived with his forces. Upon receiving reports, the leaders camped at a nearby village. With so many soldiers occupied by the wounded and their gear, the mercenaries could no longer fight while marching as they once had. Noticing the absence of Orontes' and Zacestes' banners, the leaders feared Orontes might be waiting to ambush them on the road to Armenia. The Persians attacked the camp with arrows, but the mercenaries held the advantage behind their defenses. The leaders were baffled by Tissaphernes' reckless aggression. The skirmish lasted 15 minutes before Tissaphernes retreated. Fearing a night raid, the Persians camped 10 miles away. The leaders decided to rest at dusk and march before dawn, camping whenever the Persians approached to ensure safety without delaying their progress. For 3 days, the Persians were absent. On the 4th morning, scouts reported Persians occupying the heights of a narrow pass ahead. "I will lead a force around the right side of the peaks to drive them off," Xenophon declared, confident from past successes. Then, scouts reported Tissaphernes' main army approaching from the rear. The mercenaries were in a precarious position. The narrow, hilly terrain and their high number of wounded made them vulnerable to ranged attacks. Tissaphernes had clearly planned a decisive blow. Clearchus, skipping formal debate, ordered Xenophon, "You must clear the heights immediately. If you hold the pass, Tissaphernes won't dare pursue us." "I need light infantry," Xenophon requested. "The archers and slingers stay," Clearchus countered. "We need them to counter Tissaphernes." "I will provide 500 peltasts," I offered, knowing cooperation was their only hope. Xenophon felt grateful for my consistent support. "I'll give you 800 Thracian peltasts." Timasian shouted, eager to contribute his specialized troops. After thanking them, Xenophon took his men and 200 hoplites, 1,500 in total, and set off. The remaining leaders ordered the army to increase speed and vigilance while moving toward the pass. Upon reaching the base of the mountain, Epitenes, a captain under me, pointed to a higher peak nearby. "Xenophon, look." If we attack the Persians directly, they'll just retreat to that higher summit. We should seize that peak first, then rain javelins and stones down on them from above. The Peltast captains agreed with the strategy, and Xenophon ordered the troops to seize the higher summit immediately. No content. The Persians realized too late that the Greek mercenaries were racing for the nearby heights. Both sides scrambled toward the peaks. Tissapherne's main force approached the mountain pass where the mercenaries had to raid their baggage train and wounded. Commanders shouted orders to prepare archers and slingers. As the Persian tide surged, Xenophon urged his men up the slope. Run! You are racing for your lives. This effort will save us from much harder fighting later. Despite muscle fatigue and labored breathing, the soldiers pushed on, driven by the sight of Persians climbing the same slope. The Persians faced a steeper ascent, while the Greeks took the gentler rear slope. The Greeks reached the summit first and immediately rained javelins and stones down upon the climbing Persians. The Persians fled to the foothills. Tissaphernes continued his long-range attacks despite heavy casualties. Scouts soon reported that Xenophon had secured the heights. Clearchus ordered a retreat. The mercenaries withdrew in order. As they entered the mountain pass, they hammered the pursuing Persians with projectiles from the heights. Once through the pass, they reached a plain with villages and began resupplying, preparing for the upcoming entry into the Carduchian mountains. Xenophon proposed sending envoys to the Carduchians, arguing that since both they and the Greeks opposed Persia, they could negotiate safe passage to Armenia. Temasian scoffed, noting that a massive, battle-hardened army would only terrify the locals. He doubted the fierce, independent Carduchians would trust foreigners. Cleaner added that Carduchians was merely a Persian term for various warring tribes. Negotiating with one tribe might lead to conflict with another, and the region was too barren to sustain a long, slow diplomatic process. Hieronymus insisted on a hard approach. Do not provoke, but strike back if attacked. Xanthippus warned that the difficult, narrow terrain favored the locals, who knew the mountains intimately, while the heavy infantry-laden Greeks would be vulnerable to ambushes. Xenophon reiterated his call for negotiations, but the others looked to Clearchus. Clearchus turned to me, asking for my opinion. I proposed a hybrid strategy, combine negotiation with force. The leaders were confused by the suggestion. Felicius recalled that my officers had already discussed this. It was a bold but viable plan. The leaders asked for clarification. Find one tribe, cooperate with them, and have them clear the path for us, I declared. The leaders were stunned. Xenophon realized the implication. You mean to make the Carduchians fight each other? Everything is possible for the right price, I affirmed. During their 3-day camp, Persian cavalry harassed the perimeter, stealing livestock and burning villages. Fearing Tissaphernes would continue his scorched earth tactics, the leaders decided to enter the Carduchian mountains early. On the 4th morning, the army marched north. Tissaphernes watched the long column disappear into the mountain shadows. His adjutant asked if they were really letting the Greeks go. Tissaphernes snapped that the king's orders were fulfilled. The Greeks were now entering the Carduchian trap. He predicted the terrain and the savage tribes would destroy the Greeks, followed by Irani's army and other hostile peoples. Tissaphernes decided to return to Asia Minor. Despite his heavy losses, he hoped the Greeks would be annihilated in the mountains to satisfy his grudge. The mercenaries reached the edge of the Carduchian mountains the next day, pinning their hopes on Maligi's diplomatic mission. I and the other leaders sent Maligi off with Silas, a guard detail, wagons of captured Persian gear, and several Carduchian slaves to serve as intermediaries. I embraced Maligi, telling him to prioritize safety. If things go wrong, retreat. We can always fight our way through. Maligi reassured me and the other leaders, confident that their weapons would secure an alliance. He explained that King Maluo, the ambitious chieftain of the Dukians, sought to dominate trade routes across Armenia, Dukia, and Media, making him highly receptive to their proposal. Temasian urged Maligi to act quickly, reminding him that the mercenaries could only wait 1 day. Maligi acknowledged him with a glance, but remained silent. I ignored Temasian and embraced Silas, who had insisted on accompanying the mission. I knew that sending my most trusted aide was the only way to prove to Maligi that I was fully committed to their survival. I whispered, "Return safely, brother." and Silas responded with a solemn military salute. As they vanished into the woods, Cleaner remarked on the irony of relying on a Persian to escape a crisis caused by Persians. Xanthoparis urged him not to dwell on it, noting that their survival now depended on the Persian success. Xenophon mused that it might be the will of the deities, adding that they had no choice but to wait. Clearchus reminded them to remain combat-ready before returning to camp. The leaders confined the soldiers to camp to prevent looting or conflict with the Dukians, while maintaining high alert against potential attacks. The day passed quietly, save for the occasional appearance of fur-clad, red-painted Dukian scouts lurking near the perimeter. The soldiers watched the scouts with curiosity and judgment. While the soldiers remained relaxed, the leaders were anxious, and I spent a sleepless night worrying about the alliance. At dawn, assists burst into the tent, announcing Maliji's return. I was instantly wide awake. Maliji entered, excitedly reporting that King Maluo had agreed to an alliance. I jumped up, gripping Maliji's shoulders and thanking him for saving the army. Maliji smiled but looked troubled, adding that Silas had stayed behind as a guest of King Maluo. My expression darkened as I asked, "A hostage?" Maliji explained it was a security measure for King Maluo's personal meeting with the leaders. I calmed slightly and asked for the time and place. Maliji described his difficult negotiations, noting that he had been threatened with a blade before securing a meeting at the forest edge that afternoon. I realized that King Maluo was eager for the alliance. Maliji nodded proudly. I immediately set off to find Clearchus. That afternoon, Clearchus, Cleaner, and I arrived at the forest edge with 50 Spartan warriors, while the rest of the army remained in formation at the mountain pass. Maliji pointed to a polished tree stump serving as a seat. I, projecting confidence, sat down first to clear away the debris. Clearchus and Cleaner followed suit, while Maliji stood by me. Late autumn winds chilled the air, stripping leaves from the trees as the grass turned yellow. Clearchus worried aloud about the lack of winter clothing for the soldiers and the need to cross the mountains quickly. I realized I had overlooked the looming threat of winter. As the leaders discussed the winter, the Dukians arrived, dozens of rugged men led by an elderly man. No content. The leaders focused on the central figure, a lean man wearing a vibrant fur robe over a Persian tunic, which concealed his legs. The elder shouted a greeting in the Dukian language, announcing the arrival of the Kexicant tribe's great chieftain. The tribesmen beat their axes against wooden shields, chanting rhythmically. I found the beast-like cries grating, but Maliji translated the greeting, allowing the leaders to observe the primitive ritual with curiosity. Maliji announced the greeting of Clearchus, the Spartan Ephor. The 50 Spartan warriors responded with a synchronized hey, ho, and a rhythmic strike of their spears, projecting disciplined power. King Maluo's expression shifted as he stared at the Spartan shields marked with the and symbol. Recognizing the legendary Spartan name, King Maluo signaled his men to stop and invited the Greeks to sit in fluent Persian. Clearchus, familiar with Persian, accepted the invitation. The negotiations began, revealing the Dukians to be shrewd. King Maluo demanded the Greeks serve as laborers and enforcers, arguing that the alliance would isolate his tribe from other Dukians and provoke Persia, thus requiring significant compensation. The Greek delegation, led by the diplomatic Clearchus, the business-savvy me, and the knowledgeable Maliji, prepared to counter these demands. The mercenaries insisted on maintaining their autonomy, refusing to let outsiders dictate their march. Cleaner repeatedly signaled that if an alliance failed, the soldiers were prepared to fight their way through. The Kexicant chieftains faced a dilemma. Opposing the battle-hardened Greeks meant risking their homes and resources, while losing face would invite aggression from neighboring tribes. An alliance was struck. The Greeks and the Kexicant tribe would remain peaceful, non-aggressive allies. The Greeks would determine their own route. 4 joint attacks on nearby tribes. The Greeks would take 60% of the spoils, the Kexicant 40%. Prisoners would go to the Kexicant, and the Greeks were forbidden from looting without consent. Clearchus and King Maluo would share command. If they disagreed, the operation would be cancelled, a clause Clearchus insisted upon to protect his men. The Kexicant could hire the Greeks for separate targets, provided the mercenary leaders and soldiers agreed. The mercenaries, lacking pay since Cyrus the Younger's death, saw these contracts as a vital source of income. The alliance would last until the Greeks left Dukya. The pact was sealed with a sacrifice. Clearchus slaughtered 3 white lambs, and the Kexicant offered a deer. They read the Persian inscribed terms aloud, with Clearchus officiating for the Greeks and a strange shaman for the Dukians. A sudden mountain wind extinguished the torches during the ceremony. Both sides took this as a divine omen from Zeus and the mountain god, signaling approval of the alliance. The atmosphere shifted positively, and King Moluo sent his son to serve as a guide. 20 days later, the mercenaries emerged from the mountains into the plains. The alliance had been fruitful, for mountain strongholds were taken, and a joint enemy assault was repelled. The Kexicant grew in population, and King Moluo, clearly satisfied, gifted Clearchus a white wolf pelt. After days of marching, the mercenaries reached villages, where they finally rested, pillaged supplies, and slept without fear of mountain pests. The next morning, they reached the Centrites River, the 60-meter-wide border between Armenia and Dukya. The bridge had been burned. Seeing the charred remains, the leaders realized the Persians were near. Clearchus ordered Lade's cavalry to scout and sent soldiers to test the river's depth. Soldiers waded in, finding the water chest-deep at the center. Suddenly, a cry went up. Persians! Persian cavalry appeared on a hill across the river, while infantry formed battle lines on the plain, kicking up dust as they advanced. Officers shouted for the army to form ranks. The scouts scrambled back to shore. The soldiers reported the riverbed was filled with slippery, rounded stones. Temasian noted the difficulty of crossing under fire. Across the river, over 20,000 Persians stood ready. Cleaner identified the force as Orontes, and Xenophon lamented that the enemy had beaten them to the crossing. Xanthoparis pointed out that the Persians had recruited Carduchians. I, unfamiliar with the name, turned to Felicius. Felicius explained that the Carduchians were fierce Armenian tribesmen favored by the Persians as heavy infantry. I saw them in the front ranks, wearing leather armor and carrying long shields and spears. Temasian remained defiant, claiming the Carduchians were no match for them. Xanthoparis, however, remained pessimistic about the river crossing. Clearchus calmly ordered the men to camp and search for a better ford. The army withdrew to establish a camp less than a mile from the river. Lades reported no Persians on their side, but spotted Dukians lurking in the nearby woods. Clearchus summoned Izam. Izam, King Moluo's son, had joined the mercenaries after becoming fascinated by Greek culture. Izam denied the lurkers were sent by his father and volunteered to investigate. He returned later to confirm the lurkers were from the hostile tribes they had previously fought. Xenophon felt relieved, trusting the alliance with King Moluo. Cleaner remained suspicious, labeling King Moluo a greedy opportunist who would surely exploit the situation. Temasian noted the alliance was void, though Xenophon reminded him they held King Moluo's son hostage. Cleaner countered that King Moluo had many sons and might have planned this betrayal all along. I observed the tension. Xenophon's outspoken nature often drew the ire of the older leaders, but I respected his dedication to saving their brothers. I remained reserved, choosing to learn from the experienced leaders rather than speak out, earning their respect through my steady conduct. I defended Xenophon, explaining that King Moluo, a clever and ambitious man, had left to consolidate his control over the 4 newly conquered tribes. I reasoned that King Moluo would not risk attacking them while his own position remained unstable and his enemies were numerous. Cleaner mocked the idea, questioning why the Dukya mountain tribes, who had previously been defeated, dared to provoke the powerful mercenaries instead of attacking the Kexicant tribe. I shrewdly replied that they were simply scavenging for opportunities. Clearchus intervened, stating that regardless of the tribe's origins, the priority was finding a river crossing to bypass Orontes and enter Armenia before their situation deteriorated further. The leaders fell silent. A full day had passed without success. The second day brought worse news. Dukya tribesmen had grown to over 1,000. Persian numbers were rising, and supplies were dwindling. With soldiers being attacked while gathering firewood, tensions flared. Xenophon suggested sending Izam to his father, King Moluo, to request aid against the Dukya. Temasian ridiculed the proposal, leading to a heated argument. On the third morning, Xenophon arrived triumphantly with 2 young soldiers who had discovered a fordable point in the river. The news instantly dispelled the leader's animosity, replacing it with excitement. Clearchus disguised himself as a common soldier to inspect the site. His relaxed expression upon returning confirmed the crossing was viable. Clearchus reported, the site was 8 miles upstream, 85 meters wide, waist deep, with a firm, stony bottom. The near bank was flat, while the far bank was rocky. Temasian urged the army to mobilize immediately. Xanthoparis cautioned that Orontes would likely intercept them, making a forced crossing costly. Temasian countered that the Persians would never expect such a swift, direct crossing, allowing for a surprise attack. Xanthoparis remained concerned about the vulnerable baggage train, the threat from the Dukya, and the risk of the Persians holding the bank while the mercenaries struggled in the water. Temasian demanded a better alternative. Xanthoparis insisted they deliberate to minimize losses. Temasian scoffed at his lack of a concrete plan. Xenophon proposed a diversion: leave a force with the baggage train at the original bridge site to feint a crossing, forcing the Persians to split their defenses. Cleaner questioned the logistics, noting that splitting forces might delay the main assault and leave the baggage train exposed to the Dukya. Xenophon faltered, weakly stating that casualties were inevitable in war. I then offered my own strategy. The leaders turned to me, knowing my suggestions were always decisive. I proposed a night crossing for a vanguard force. They would hide, then strike the Persian rear during the main assault the next day, creating a pincer movement to crush the enemy and secure their path to the Euxine Sea. The leaders were struck by the brilliance of the plan, which broke from traditional Greek frontal assault doctrine. Cleaner worried about the soldiers' lack of night crossing experience and the risk of panic or discovery. Temasian added concerns about hiding the troops and timing the attack. I dismissed these fears, signaling to Clearchus that the right men were chosen. That night, 700 Spartan warriors successfully crossed the Centrites River. The next morning, the mercenaries formed ranks, and the Persians gathered on the opposite bank. The leaders sacrificed lambs to Oceanus, and the army sang hymns. Orontes, sensing a crossing, prepared his forces. The mercenaries marched downstream, then upstream, confusing Orontes, who watched with smug satisfaction, believing they were lost. The Persian army shadowed them from the opposite bank. Reaching the ford, the mercenaries pivoted and deployed into 3 sections: 7,000 hoplites for the crossing, the baggage train, and 3,000 soldiers to guard the rear against the Dukya. As the Persians adjusted, the mercenaries sounded the charge and entered the Centrites River. Orontes finally realized their intent. Orontes panicked, ordering his infantry to block the bank and archers to fire, hoping the current and arrows would cause chaos and drowning. He hoped this would be his moment of glory. I marched firmly behind the front lines, feeling the riverbed. Despite the biting cold, the soldiers were driven by a singular urge to reach the other side. Reaching the center, the water was only waist deep, boosting the soldiers' confidence and pace. Persian archers managed only 2 volleys before the mercenaries reached the bank, their formation disrupted by the mercenaries' slingers. Orontes, a pampered noble, panicked as the mercenaries surged toward him like wolves. His aide urged the infantry to intercept. The mercenaries slowed at the rocky bank, allowing the Persians to surround them. The mercenaries held their ground with shield walls and pikes, while the rear ranks pushed forward, their combined strength countering the Persians and the fierce Carduchians. A bloody struggle ensued on the north bank. Both sides fought with the desperation of survival. The mercenaries in the river faced the dual threat of exhaustion from the cold water and relentless Persian arrows. I watched a soldier fall, his armor dragging him down. I anxiously awaited the Spartans. Orontes, watching from a rock, felt a glimmer of hope as the battle stalled. Suddenly, chaos erupted on the Persian right flank. The Spartans had struck, shattering the Persian light infantry and archers. The Persians fled in terror, their lines collapsing. The mercenaries on the bank broke through the Carduchians, slaughtering the disorganized enemy. Orontes fled with his guard, weeping at the loss of his 20,000-strong army. The mercenary leaders decided to spare non-Persian allies like the Carduchians, but ordered the slaughter of the Persians. The hoplites drove the pleading Persians into the river, where they drowned in the crush. I looked away, noting the Dukya had vanished in fear. The baggage train crossed safely. The army occupied Orani's camp, feasted on captured supplies, and offered sacrifices to Zeus and Oceanus. With Orontes defeated, the path to Armenia was open, and the soldiers' confidence in returning home soared. This concludes Volume 1. While this adventure is a small part of Xenophon's Anabasis, I have focused on my growth as a leader rather than detailing every subsequent hardship. I have now established myself as a capable leader. This volume was constrained by the historical framework of the Anabasis, but it allowed for a blend of 80% innovation with 20% historical fact. The next setting is a region largely ignored by history, known only through fragmented records from Herodotus, Thucydides, and archaeological findings. I have synthesized these fragments with my own research and imagination to create a compelling narrative for my journey. My long journey has only just begun. Join us for Volume 2. In 657 BC, Prince Byzas of Megara sought an oracle at Delphi for a new colony site and received the cryptic instruction, "Build opposite the blind." Byzas initially misunderstood the oracle. Only upon reaching Chalcedon, east of the Bosporus, did he realize its meaning. Chalcedon's location was so poor it couldn't even see the golden horn opposite, a site only a blind man would choose. He subsequently founded a colony on the opposite shore, naming it Byzantium. Originally a minor Megarian colony, Byzantium remained small for centuries but grew strategically vital. As Athens rose, its grain supply relied on Euxine sea city-states. Byzantium, controlling the passage between the Euxine and Aegean, became a key Athenian target and eventually a member of the Delian League. After the Peloponnesian War, the victorious Spartans recognized Byzantium's strategic value. They installed a puppet regime and garrisoned the city to control the Bosporus Strait. In early spring 399 BC, Berkos sailed into the Byzantine harbor. Seeing over 100 warships packed into the port, he breathed a sigh of relief, hoping he had arrived in time. As he signaled his crew to dock, the harbor erupted in chaos. People panicked, scrambling onto ships and cutting cables to flee. Ships collided and capsized, throwing men into the water. Berkos ordered his ship to reverse, narrowly avoiding the melee. He anchored outside the harbor, joining dozens of other vessels watching the unfolding disaster. Looking at the once busy harbor now deserted and wrecked, a confused Berkos shouted to a nearby ship, "Hey, what's happening?" "It's the damn mercenaries. The ones returning from Persia are attacking Byzantium." Berkos' heart skipped a beat. Why? Who knows? The Spartans promised them supplies if they came here, then reneged and locked them out of the city. Now they're furious. It's a lawless time. Soldiers act like bandits, and we citizens pay the price. An elderly captain interjected, asking, "You're not from here, are you? Where are you from?" Berkos hesitated before answering, "Thurii. Thurii, in Magna Graecia? I've been to Tarentum, a wealthy, wonderful place. You're lucky to be from there. Asia Minor is pure chaos and constant war." Ignoring the old man's rambling, Berkos asked, "Who is in charge of Byzantium now?" "The Spartan general Cleander," the old man complained. "Spartans only know how to kill, not govern. Since they took over, everything has gone downhill." Berkos' interest piqued. "Old man, what's your name? You've been a captain a long time. You must know all the shipowners here." "Pisilas of Byzantium. I started sailing when Pericles was chief general of Athens. I even saw him when he came to the Euxine for grain. I know every captain and sailor here." He asked casually, "Are you looking to charter ships?" "Possibly," Berkos replied vaguely. "What are you transporting? Grain? Timber? Stone? Olive oil?" the old man pressed. Faced with the prying, Berkos sighed and said, "Perhaps, people." The experienced old man's eyes widened. "The mercenaries? That explains why you asked about the shipowners. Good. Get them out of here, and Byzantium might finally have peace." Berkos remained noncommittal. Just then, a signal from the harbor indicated it was safe to enter. "Hey, if you need ships, tell any Byzantine at the docks you're looking for old Pisilas," the old man shouted as his ship moved toward the pier. "Understood," Berkos replied, wondering if he should visit the Spartan commander Cleander first. Near Byzantium, in Thracian villages occupied by the Greek mercenaries, dusk had fallen. Most soldiers were resting, but one large tent remained lit. I was deep in thought, failing to notice Calixitoya enter. "What are you thinking about, my love?" she asked, wrapping her arms around me. I sighed. "We staged a show of force today to pressure the Spartans into giving us supplies, but it's a temporary fix." Mercis brought news. Thybron has been appointed Spartan governor of Asia Minor and is recruiting in Ephesus. You were right. Sparta is preparing for war with Persia. Cleander is trapping us here to use us against the Thracians and likely hopes to conscript us for the Persian campaign. Clearchus values you. Calixitoya teased, and Anakexabusi tried to recruit you, though you ignored him to favor Xenophon. Xenophon is good at that, but I have no interest in Sparta, I said irritably. If we keep fighting for them, we'll die without a home. We're like fish out of water, waiting to be slaughtered. Calixitoya kissed my cheek. Don't be so gloomy. I met someone today who might solve your troubles. Who? I asked. Calixitoya called out. Marcius, bring him in. A middle-aged man with a kind face entered the tent. The man studied me, surprised by my youth. I had changed since the battle at the Centrites River. The hardships and bloodshed had left me with a scar, a beard, and a sharper, more lethal gaze. Burkos, a citizen of Thurii, greets General Davos, the man said, bowing. Thurii? I was confused. My modern-day knowledge of history was limited, and my current body's memories offered no help. Calixitoya explained, Thurii is a young Greek colony in Magna Graecia, west of the Gulf of Taranto. After Croton destroyed Sybaris, the survivors sought help from Athens. Pericles responded by building a new Panhellenic city on the old site, drawing immigrants from across Greece, including Miletus. Your knowledge is impressive, my lady, Burkos said politely. Sybaris, I muttered, suddenly remembering. Is that the place where the citizens were so decadent they trained their horses to dance, only to be defeated by Croton using music? Yes, Burkos replied, watching me with newfound curiosity. I recalled the story as a famous fable involving the mathematician Pythagoras. Italy. My interest surged. Why have you come to me? Burkos grew tense. After being rejected by other leaders, I was his last hope. Thurii is under attack by indigenous tribes. We want to hire you and your soldiers to drive them back. I and Calixitoya exchanged glances. Burkos pressed. We offered generous pay. I leaned forward, intrigued. How much? Sensing hope, Burkos immediately perked up. 1 Daric gold coin per soldier, per month. I remained silent and leaned back. Wait, I misspoke. 1.5. No, 2. 2 Daric gold coins. Burkos stammered, unnerved by my stony expression. What disaster hit Thurii to make you this desperate? I smiled slightly. Burkos realized he had underestimated this young man and, in his anxiety to secure the mercenaries, had revealed his hand. Burkos, if you want my cooperation, tell me the truth, I demanded firmly. Seeing a sliver of hope, Burkos confessed heavily. The Lacanians invaded our territory. Our assembly sent 10,000 hoplites and 1,000 cavalry, but they were slaughtered. Fewer than 300 returned. The Lacanians haven't besieged the city yet, but they've taken Amendolara, causing mass panic. I am their last hope. He wept. Hardened by a year of war, I ignored the tears and asked, were they all citizens of Thurii? Yes, Thurii is one of the most prosperous city-states in Magna Graecia, Burkos replied with lingering pride. 11,000 men defeated? Are the Lacanians that strong? I probed. No, they only have about 8,000. It was our lack of leadership and a reckless ambush, Burkos admitted. I stroked my stubble. Why not seek help from other city-states? Our defensive alliance is failing. Tarentum, Locri, and Croton are overstretched. Syracuse fights Carthage. I petitioned Sparta, but they are embroiled with Persia. They refused to send troops, but offered to facilitate hiring mercenaries in Greece, Burkos explained. Greece has no shortage of soldiers. Why us? I asked. Burkos flattered him. I heard of your safe retreat from the heart of Persia. Your prowess is legendary. I tracked you from Ephesus to Chrysopolis and finally here to Byzantium. I remained unmoved, nodding. Are the Lacanians strong? What are their units, equipment, and tactics? I fired a barrage of questions regarding Lucania's geography, politics, and economy. Burkos struggled to keep up, stunned by the mercenary leader's depth of knowledge. He realized I was truly unique, which only increased his confidence. I understand the situation, I concluded, leaving Burkos relieved. I assumed Tamasian, Xanaparis, and Cleaner already rejected you? I asked. Burkos stared in shock. I know their plans. Tamasian wants to return home. The others are joining the Thracian chieftain Cetus. Xenophon is with Anik. I am your only remaining option. Burkos dropped the act. You are my only chance. Will you accept? No text. I smiled. I accept. Burkos was overjoyed. Don't celebrate yet. I must convince my officers and men, who are weary of war and want to go home. The higher the pay, the easier it will be. 2 Derek gold coins per soldier. Burkos declared. I asked, how many men do you need? As many as possible. That's a massive payroll. Can Thurii afford 5,000 men? Thurii is wealthy. We can easily support 10,000 for a year, Burkos insisted. I hope so. How do we get there? Do you have ships? I've negotiated with the ship owners in Byzantium. We have as many as we need. Will the Spartans allow us to leave? I asked. I have authorization from the Spartan Senate. Cleander, the governor of Byzantium, is eager to see you go, Burkos replied. I agreed. Everything is arranged, then. I will give you my final troop count and a formal agreement tomorrow morning. Burkos left, feeling triumphant. Are you really going to Thurii? Calixitoia asked. Yes, I replied, my eyes gleaming. This is our chance to stop being fish in the water and become the fishermen casting the net. Matoni sat on the ground, curious. As a squad leader, he had never been summoned to a high-level meeting by the Herald Assists before. Was something major happening? Seeing Oliverus laughing nearby, Matonis felt annoyed. Oliverus, keep it down. This is a military meeting, not your tent. Oliverus retorted, still bitter about your 2 soldiers who were punished for looting Matonis? Matonis fumed, but dared not shout back. Since entering Armenia, I had become a pivotal leader. My military genius and charisma had won over the troops, and I had begun a systematic reform of the army. During the Armenian campaign, the mercenaries suffered frequent casualties in mountainous terrain. I reorganized my 1,400-man force, merging 14 100-man units into 7 200-man companies. Each company comprised 4 50-man platoons, allowing for flexible tactics like frontal engagement, flanking, and reserves. This reform significantly boosted combat efficiency, leading soldiers to boast that I was not only favored by Hades, but also guided by Athena. I promoted loyal, capable officers to fill vacancies. Silas became a company commander, while Matonis, Oliverus, and Geogris were promoted to platoon leaders, tightening my control. I then implemented a strict military law. To curb the rampant looting causing local conflicts, I enforced discipline and mandated rigorous camp construction, including trenches and palisades, which were previously neglected. Initially resistant, the soldiers accepted the rules after my camp survived 2 night raids unscathed while others suffered heavy losses. I used moderate punishments like flogging and food deprivation, which, while humiliating to proud Greeks, proved effective. Despite the strict discipline and combat losses, which usually decimated mercenary ranks, my force remained stable at approximately 1,400 men, contrasting sharply with the overall Greek mercenary decline from 13,000 to 9,000. 4 factors sustained my numbers: fair distribution of spoils by Maligi, superior combat effectiveness, the success of my medical corps, aided by Calixitoia, and my personal charisma as a God-favored leader who cared for my men. Having adapted to the new regulations, the soldiers understood that violations would be punished. As I entered the meeting tent with Maligi, Matonis felt anxious about his own men's recent infractions. Note: the historical annihilation of Thurii citizen soldiers by the Lacanians occurred roughly a decade later. I had my guard captain, Marcius, secure the area around the tent with 30 guards. Inside, I surveyed my officers, the steady company commander Capus, the perceptive Antonius and the courageous Amyntas, the strategic Alexis and my loyal confidant, Silas, the tactical Epitines and the pious Zippite, both leading peltasts, along with quartermaster Mercis, medical officer Herpulesi, herald assists, cavalry leader Lades, and 28 platoon leaders. These 1,400 veterans formed my entire foundation. I needed to convince them to follow me to a distant land. I opened by praising their farce in Byzantium, which successfully pressured Kleander into providing food. The men roared with laughter. Oliverus joked that it was a comedy, noting the terrified reactions of the Byzantines. Everyone laughed, except for a nervous Matones. I sighed, warning that the comedy was temporary. With Sparta preparing to fight Persia and recruiting veterans, they risked being dragged back into the Persian War. The news caused immediate panic. Many soldiers had hoped to settle down elsewhere. I dropped another bombshell. The sympathetic Kleander was being replaced by the Spartan Aristarchus. A gasp rippled through the room. I coldly reminded them that Aristarchus was infamous for selling defeated Greeks into slavery. The room erupted in outrage at the prospect of being enslaved. Some argued they were free men and that such an act would violate Greek tradition. Others countered that Sparta, as the hegemon, acted with impunity. I seized the moment, painting a grim picture. As landless mercenaries, they were viewed as thieves by the city-states. They were constantly exploited by Spartan commanders like Ananakexabusi and Kleander. I argued that their only future in Greece was slavery, death in battle, or dying as impoverished, despised outcasts. As the room fell into a somber silence, I asked with tearful intensity if this was the fate they deserved after a year of blood and struggle. My words struck home. Scylla stood, trembling, and begged me to lead them to a way out. The other officers echoed the plea, desperate for my guidance. I assumed a solemn expression, recounting a dream where a golden figure showed me the Mediterranean, the Peloponnese, Italy, the Pillars of Hercules, and the coast of Egypt. The vivid description captivated the officers, who found my geographical knowledge convincing. They asked what the figure said. I claimed the figure told me my soldiers' mission lay in the west. The men speculated wildly about the location, Sicily, Italy, Iberia, and the identity of the divine messenger. I inwardly sighed. I had avoided the God-favored persona, but this situation required the weight of divine authority. I knew oracles were often ambiguous, like the one that led to the fall of the kingdom of Lydia. Note, Thurii and Amendalara. I claimed the Thurii envoy's arrival confirmed my dream. Capus asked if Thurii wanted to hire them to fight natives. I confirmed, noting that all of Magna Graecia was under threat. Antonius questioned if fighting in Italy was any different from fighting in Persia. I used the question to explain. In Persia, they fought for Spartan gain with little reward. In Magna Graecia, they would be fighting for their own kin. I highlighted the high pay, 2 Daric gold coins per month, and the support they would receive from fellow Greeks. I asked Alexis about the population of Athens. Alexis estimated 300,000. I emphasized that cities like Syracuse, Thurii, and Croton were equally prosperous, offering vast opportunities. Epitenes asked what these opportunities were. I revealed the ultimate prize, the chance to reclaim lands seized by Lacanians and Bruttians. I declared that they would not just be mercenaries, but masters of their own cities, land-owning citizens. I vowed to go to Magna Graecia regardless of their choice. The room fell silent, the men staring at my fist with intense longing. For land-starved Greeks, the promise of ownership was intoxicating. Zippite voiced a concern about the strength of the natives. Amyntas scoffed, calling the natives inferior to the Carduchians and declaring his readiness. Zippite immediately pledged his life to the mission. Scylla stood, declaring himself my shield. Amyntas rose, calling himself the spear. Felicius, Antonius, Capus, and others stood one by one, pledging their roles in the campaign. Combined with above, Alexis and the Peltasts joined the chorus of support. Combined with above, Mercis and Herculesi pledged their continued service. Combined with above, assists also stood, refusing to be left behind. Seeing my officers united, I felt my blood boil with excitement and shouted for them to follow me to the west to find their Elysian fields. After securing the officers' support, I instructed them to keep the true destination of Thurii secret to avoid interference. The officers swore an oath to Hades. I ordered them to persuade their soldiers to join the expedition, covertly recruiting from other camps to retain experienced veterans I had fought alongside. I returned to my tent with Maligi, who immediately declared, "I am willing to go to Thurii with you." I smiled. "You are quite clever. Is that not why you let me listen in?" Maliji retorted angrily. What if I refused? Would you kill me? I shook my head. I would simply bind your hands and feet, toss you in the hold, and release you upon arrival. I thought you were a cultured, honorable Greek, Maliji hissed. You are just another bandit. Is that how a slave speaks to the master who saved his life? I feigned shock. Maliji stared in disbelief, realizing he had misjudged me. Note: Elysium is the peaceful afterlife for the righteous under Hades' domain. Empty. I sneered. What do you think Tamasian and Cleaner see you as? If I left you and your family here, you know what would happen. You promised to send me to Asia Minor. Maliji cried. It is a war zone. I could live anonymously in the mountains, Maliji insisted. I countered. Cyrus wasted your talent. In Persia, your status limits you. But with me, you will have a vast stage to prove your worth. Maliji scoffed. Following you to fight natives and rule a small village. Cyrus the Great began as a minor tribal chief before building an empire, I declared confidently. I am a mercenary leader today, but who knows what I will be in decades. Maliji hesitated, intimidated by my intensity. Do I have a choice? I grinned. What do you think? If you succeed, what will my role be? Maliji asked. I held up 2 fingers, either Minister of Foreign Affairs or Minister of Commerce. Recalling the stress of negotiating with the Kexicant, Maliji chose the latter. I promised to reserve the position. The next day, Burkos was thrilled to learn the officers were joining. I tasked Maliji with negotiating the contract while I focused on the troops. Most mercenaries were destitute and disillusioned, making them receptive to my charisma and the promise of pay. By evening, my force grew to over 2,000, including the officer Hieronymus. The contract stipulated 2,133 men, paid 2 Derrick gold coins per month, with free housing and daily rations. Delays would result in double pay/rations. The mercenaries were only obligated to defend Thurii against Lacanians. Extra tasks required new negotiations. They agreed to abide by Thurii's laws. They were barred from entering the city without permission, but kept all spoils of war. The contract was set for 1 year, starting April 1st, 399 BC. Burkos and I swore by the gods and signed the parchment. Burkos asked why I insisted on bringing 500 slaves and women, calling them a burden. I explained that the soldiers viewed these people as their only property and family. Without them, the men would not follow me. Burkos joked that they would be rich in a year anyway. They have to survive first, I replied. Burkos shrugged and left to arrange supplies, noting he had secured ships. Does Cleander allow us into the city? I asked. Burkos slapped his forehead. Yes, but you must enter unarmed. I tensed. Burkos assured him they would receive new gear in Thurii. We will never abandon our weapons. I stated firmly. I refuse to risk a trap like the one that befell Clearchus. Burkos panicked. Then Cleander won't let you in. I compromised. We will wrap our blades in spearheads, but we keep our weapons. Burkos agreed to negotiate further. Note: ancient Greeks dated years by the 4-year Olympic cycle. Empty. Cleander relented, mostly because Burkos bribed him with half a talent of silver. I lamented that even the austere Spartans were corruptible. The next morning, the remaining mercenaries gathered to bid them farewell. Tamasian embraced me, saying, if I were younger, I would join you in Magna Graecia. You aren't old yet. I laughed. Tamasian clutched his chest, sighing. I'm old and just want home. Thank you for your immense help. Without you, our losses would have been far greater. It was a collective effort, I replied humbly. It was my honor to fight alongside you. The honor was mine. May Zeus grant you a smooth journey. Tamasian said sincerely. And you as well. I hope we meet again. I waved goodbye. As Tamasian, Cleaner, and Xanthoparis led their troops back, the gates of Byzantium opened, and I marched my army inside. Xanthoparis remarked, time flies. It feels like yesterday Davos was elected leader and gave his first speech. His words stirred melancholy among the leaders. After 6 months of shared hardship, they were finally parting ways. They watched silently until the city gates closed behind me. The herald Tormid asked, do you think Davos is truly favored by Hades? If not, he is simply a remarkably capable leader, Tamasian countered, preferring to credit divinity over admitting a younger man surpassed them. Cleaner and Xanaparis nodded in agreement. Cleaner chuckled. Clearchus will regret Davos leaving for Magna Graecia. He tried to make Davos a Spartan protege, but Hexabusi underestimated the boy, and Davos chose Magna Graecia over Sparta. No one likes Sparta. They are too overbearing. Timasian added, drawing nods from the others. Then why did Hieronymus choose Magna Graecia too? Tormod asked. Timasian scoffed. Because that Athenian, Xenophon, stole his leadership position during the re-election at Sinope. Hieronymus likely wants to prove himself elsewhere. Not being a leader is easier, Xanaparis mused. Soon, we can all go home. Realizing their time was short, the four exchanged formal military salutes and rode toward their respective camps. Spartan soldiers lined the streets with spears as my troops marched toward the harbor. The mercenaries kept their eyes forward, maintaining a stoic, dignified pace. A Byzantium citizen shattered the silence by hurling a rotten date at me, shouting, "Get out, mercenaries! Leave Byzantium! Thieves! May the gods curse you!" The crowd jeered, pelting them with debris. The insults and projectiles rained down on the marching column. I, sensing danger, shouted, "Assists, tell the officers to keep their men in line. No one is to break formation." My order was timely. The newer mercenaries were on the verge of retaliating against the taunting crowd. Officers scrambled to maintain order as I commanded. Double time. Cleander watched from a rooftop, surprised that the undisciplined mercenaries remained restrained, ruining his plan to provoke a conflict and seize their weapons. "Who leads them?" he asked. "Davos," his adjutant replied. Cleander found the name vaguely familiar. "They are surprisingly disciplined. Shall we stop them?" "No." Cleander waved him off. He had already taken bribes from Thurii merchants and only wanted an excuse to disarm them. Without a fight, he had no pretext. The mercenaries endured the humiliation, their anger simmering as they hurried toward the harbor. Once the fleet of 57 ships departed, the soldiers erupted in rage. Even the mild-mannered assists vowed, "Byzantium, one day I will repay this insult." I stood at the stern, watching the city vanish. Mid-voyage in the Sea of Marmara, they were intercepted by Spartan warships. Burkos boarded the Spartan flagship to plead for passage. He soon ordered a large chest to be brought aboard the warship. After an hour, he returned, exhaling in relief. "We can proceed." "What happened?" I asked. "Sparta controls the straits," Burkos explained. "They inspect all large fleets, especially those I hire." "Why?" "Since defeating Athens, Sparta mandates that any city-state hiring mercenaries in their territory needs permission. Only Dionysius of Syracuse has long-term clearance." "Dionysius?" "A tyrant of Syracuse." Burkos spat with disdain. I noted the name. "I had to bribe them with half a talent to get the permit," Burkos sighed. "Spartan generals have become so greedy." He looked at me. "I hope your performance justifies the cost." "You will see," I promised. Suddenly, a voice called out, "Davos! Davos!" Note, Davos's Persian saga concludes here. We shall see what the future holds. I looked up at a trireme. "Xenophon, I thought I'd missed my chance to say goodbye. I was sent by Hexabusi to rally the mercenaries for Asia Minor, but you're leaving for Magna Graecia? Stay and fight with us." Xenophon urged. I shrugged. "I've signed a pact with Thurii and sworn an oath to Hades." Xenophon looked disappointed. "A pity we cannot fight together." "It seems Sparta is going to war with Persia," I said. "May Zeus protect you in the coming battles." "I wish you the same," Xenophon said sincerely. "I wanted to invite you to Athens to meet my teacher, Socrates. He would be fascinated by your novel ideas. My friend Plato shares your views. You two would get along perfectly. Alas, I will visit Athens one day. By then, you will have finished our story in Persia. Don't forget to send me a copy." I knew Xenophon would write the Anabasis, though I couldn't recall the man's full life story. "Rest assured, I will have an extra copy made for you," Xenophon laughed. I recalled that Socrates was eventually executed by the Athenian authorities. I knew Socrates could have fled, but chose to stay to awaken the numb citizenry. Deciding not to interfere, I simply waved. "Goodbye, goodbye." Their paths diverged, and they would soon become enemies. As the Spartan ships vanished into the blue horizon, Burkos approached the pensive me at the stern. "Still thinking of your Athenian friend?" "Xenophon is a man of great talent." I sighed, feeling a sense of loss for the first historical figure who bridged my past life with this one. Athens' brilliance was built on such talented men, Burkos remarked. We owe our own prosperity in Thurii to their influence. Oh, really? I was intrigued. Burkos recounted. Thurii was founded by capable Athenians like Lampon and Xenocritus. Protagoras drafted our laws, and the engineer Hippodamus designed the city. Scholars like Herodotus and the rhetorician Tisias settled here, while the Spartan Cleandridas commanded our forces. This allowed us to balance peace with Croton, contest the Cirrus plain against Tarentum, defend against the Lacanians and Bruttians, and thrive through trade, becoming a powerhouse of Magna Graecia. I listened intently. Burkos's pride dimmed. But Athens lost to Sparta. Now, Sparta is the hegemon of Greece. Does this affect Thurii? I asked urgently. Burkos replied vaguely. You will learn soon enough once we arrive. I smiled. Don't worry, Sparta's hegemony won't last. Burkos was stunned. Why? Because the Spartans are taking bribes, I said. Lycurgus designed their system to forge fierce warriors to suppress the Helots and dominate Greece. By enforcing a simple, austere life, he ensured equality. But now, as hegemon, Spartans travel abroad for months, exposed to luxuries they were forbidden. It is easy to destroy a simple life, but hard to build one. Once their fighting spirit is eroded by corruption, their hegemony will crumble. Burkos stared at the young man in awe, recalling rumors that I was God-favored. He asked, voice dry, if so, who will rise to challenge Sparta? I shrugged. I am no deity. I looked at the gulls, my mind racing with names like Thebes and Macedonia, a surge of ambition rising within me. Fearing more Spartan interference, Burkos ordered the fleet to sail day and night. Days later, they resupplied at Euboea, then sailed through the Cyclades, bypassing Attica. I watched the distant coast of Athens with regret, unable to land. They skirted Argos and the Peloponnese, resting briefly at Zakynthos. The next day, they headed north to Corcyra before turning west into the Gulf of Taranto. The harbor was calm, its waters like a sheet of blue silk, busy with ships weaving patterns across the surface. The mercenaries, exhausted by the long voyage, grew excited at the sight. Burkos's fleet drew attention, and several triremes bearing the man riding a dolphin emblem approached. It's fine, just Tarentine patrol ships, Burkos told me as their lead ship signaled them. Have we entered Tarentine waters? I asked. Not yet. It's just a regional protocol among the city-states to keep each other informed, Burkos explained. The Tarentine ships turned away, and the fleet continued. An hour later, Burkos pointed forward. That is Thurii. I peered ahead, a green coastline, a white ribbon of a river flowing into the sea, and a cluster of white sails, though the city remained hidden. Thurii is about 20 miles from the mouth of the Crathis River, Burkos explained. If Thurii is at war with the Lacanians, why is there so much trade? I asked. The Lacanians have no fleet to blockade us. War only increases the demand for supplies, and merchants are here to profit. The fleet slowed to a halt. The lead ship went ahead, returning an hour later with a man who boarded their vessel. Burkos, you're back. I thought the Lacanians had scared you off to Greece, the man joked. If even a coward like you stayed, how could I leave? Burkos laughed, embracing him. Is everything well? They asked in unison, laughing at the shared relief. The barbarians lacked siegecraft and ships. They destroyed our farms, but the harvest was already in. A plague broke out in their camp over winter, forcing them to retreat to the mountains, leaving only a small force at Amendalara. A plague. Burkos looked horrified. They slaughtered thousands of our citizens and piled the bodies outside our walls. Zeus punished them for their cruelty, while we remained unharmed, the man said with a mix of anger and pride. Burkos praised Zeus. As the weather warms, they are returning. Fortunately, Tarentum sent reinforcements. As leaders of the defensive alliance, it's about time. They've just repelled the Messapians and sent 1,500 hoplites and 50 cavalry, led by Archytas. Which Archytas? The only one. The son of the former Tarentine Archon Histiaves, the genius they keep talking about. Burkos introduced me, a Thessalian commander of the Greek mercenaries who fought in Persia, to his friend Polixenes, a newly elected general of Thurii. I bowed slightly. Greetings, General Polixenes. Polixenes nodded, then asked Burkos, did you say you served in the Persian expedition? Burkos boasted of my exploits. Polixenes was stunned. Incredible. To lead men out of the heart of Persia surrounded by thousands. Truly amazing. I replied modestly. It was a collective effort, though many brothers fell on the way home. Burkos seized the moment to justify his high-priced hiring of me. I brought them here to use their combat experience to repel the Lacanians. Polixenes agreed. The Board of Generals has authorized your fleet to dock at the river mouth and camp at the old site of Sybaris. Burkos paled and pulled Polixenes aside, whispering, are you mad? Thurii has a treaty with Croton forbidding the use of the old Sybaris site. That's why we built Thurii elsewhere. Polixenes shrugged. Cunagharata insisted, and the other generals agreed. The previous mercenaries have already been camped there for a month. Burkos fumed. Cunagharata is trying to destroy Thurii by provoking Croton. Polixenes dismissed his fears, noting that Croton was currently distracted by the Bruttians. He argued that with 4,000 or 5,000 mercenaries, there was nowhere else to camp but that wasteland. Didn't you say the surrounding fields were destroyed? Burkos asked. Farmers have returned to replant wheat since the Lacanians retreated. We can't disrupt their crops, Polixenes replied. What if the Lacanians return? Burkos asked. That is what we are currently debating, Polixenes answered. Burkos stared at him, then remarked, the generals are certainly bold, or perhaps they've forgotten last year's humiliation. Polixenes fell silent, looking embarrassed. The fleet entered the river mouth via a cleared channel, though disembarking at the makeshift pier proved difficult. Burkos, Felicius, assists, and the guard disembarked, still unsteady from the long sea voyage. Felicius grabbed a handful of soil, sniffed it, and exclaimed to me, it's black earth. I realized the significance, sighing, this is truly fertile land. Burkos boasted, the Sybaris plain is the best in the region, fed by the Crathis River. That's why Sybaris was so wealthy. They walked inland and soon reached the ruins of Sybaris. I noticed high-quality red marble among the ruins. I asked Burkos, why didn't Thurii use such fine stone when building the city? Note, Magna Graecia refers to the Greek city-states in southern Italy. Burkos admitted the truth. Athens and Croton signed a treaty forcing Thurii to leave Sybaris in ruins. Arrogant Croton, I mused. Is it to flaunt their power? Perhaps, Burkos said, or to remind us never to repeat the mistakes of Sybaris. I joked about Thurii's patience, then asked, isn't camping here a violation of that treaty? Burkos feigned nonchalance. It's an emergency. Croton will understand. I hope they see it that way, I replied. Burkos remained silent, realizing I saw through the political danger. As they walked, Felicius suggested, Leader, let's establish our camp here. I surveyed the area, the existing mercenary camp to the north, the Crathis River to the south, the sea to the east, and farmland to the west. I realized the ground was paved with stone, the center of the old city. I agreed. As Felicius went to fetch the troops, a group of men from the other camp approached. Hey, where are you from? One shouted. Burkos identified the man as Dracos. This is me, Davos of Thessaly, hired by Thurii to fight the Lacanians. Dracos looked at me with disdain, then noticed assists measuring the ground, his expression shifting. We are setting up camp here. We'll be neighbors, I said with a smile. You're camping here? Dracos shouted. It's convenient and allows for mutual support, I replied calmly. We don't need your support. Move at least 300 meters south. Dracos ordered. That would put us right by the river, I noted. I don't care. Get out of here. Dracos insisted. Burkos stepped forward. Dracos, this is Thurian land. You have no authority here. Thurii designated these Sybaris ruins as our camp, so we have the right to be here first. Dracos declared arrogantly. As Burkos tried to intervene, I held him back. I understand. It seems power is the only language spoken here. I sneered. Oh, a smart one, are you? Want to fight? Dracos laughed dismissively. I whispered to assists, bring the troops. Tell them there's a chance to stretch their limbs. Understood. Assists ran off. Marcius, what are you waiting for? With me. I charged forward. Marcius, a warrior once famed alongside Matonis, had been restrained by his duties as guard captain. Eager for action, he led 30 guards in a fierce charge. As I closed in, Dracos threw a heavy punch at my head. I ducked, maintaining my momentum to slip inside Dracos' right flank. Before Dracos could retract his arm or pivot, I struck his ribs with a lightning-fast left, then followed with a right hook to the chin, lifting the giant off his feet before he collapsed backward. Burkos watched in shock as Dracos fell instantly. He had only known me as a refined, intellectual leader. He hadn't realized my lethality. Marcius's guards fought with ruthless efficiency, coordinating perfectly to overwhelm the disorganized opposition. Despite being outnumbered, the guards suffered no losses, quickly subduing their foes. Before Burkos could speak, the sound of thundering footsteps approached. "Davos, we're here," Matoni shouted, leading the reinforcements. Seeing the enemy camp mobilizing, I ordered, "Match their numbers. Rotate the men, beat them all, but no killing. Roar." The soldiers cheered, eager for the fray. A massive brawl ensued, ending quickly as the enemy soldiers, seeing their comrades groaning on the ground, retreated in fear. Burkos, relieved yet anxious, asked, "Isn't this too much? How will you fight alongside Dracos now?" I rubbed my knuckles. "You don't understand mercenaries. After this, they'll know exactly who holds the authority here." Burkos gained a new perspective on me. Meanwhile, Kepis, a mercenary recruited in Byzantium, complained to Matonis while digging trenches. "I didn't come here for 2 Derrick gold coins just to dig ditches after a 10-day voyage." Matonis glared. "If you don't want to work, leave. I don't want a flogging." Kepis shuddered. "They say this camp is strict. It's true. We're mercenaries, not the Spartan army." Matonis, frustrated by the lack of discipline among the new recruits compared to his veterans, snapped. "Your trench is too shallow. The leader wants 3 meters wide and deep. It won't pass inspection." "Empty." Kepis fell silent under Matonis' stern gaze. Matonis, ignoring him, climbed out to check the progress. Seeing Oliverus' squad lagging, he roared, "Work harder. First squad to finish gets the reward. No slackers." "Roar." The veterans shouted, while the new recruits responded weakly. "Leader," Assists asked, "Why such complex defenses?" "The soldiers are complaining." I replied, "Burkos says 10,000 Lacanians attacked last year. We have no city walls. If we don't build a secure camp, we won't survive a siege. Will Thurii save us?" Assist shook his head. "Exactly. This camp provides safety. Use the engineering battalion to guide the others. We'll build it in stages." "You are incredibly thorough," Assist remarked. I smiled. I was simply implementing the proven methods of the Roman legion, hoping to instill their fortify everywhere tradition into my own men. "Leader, Felicius is back," Assist noted. I hurried to meet him. "Report. A river lies 10 miles north, with forests on the far bank. Is it passable?" "The water is shallow, but we spotted Lacanian scouts, likely from Amendolara." I decided, "Take 500 soldiers and 100 slaves. Secure the forest, harvest timber, and scout the area around Amendolara." "Understood." 100 meters away, Dracos and 2 other leaders watched from a boulder. "Are they building a camp or a city?" one mocked. "Adrianx," Sycetus said. "If they finish, the Lacanians won't break them. Our camps are flimsy by comparison. We should reinforce ours." "My men are lazy. They only care about pay," Adrianx sighed. "It's strange," Syceta noted. "They have no common origin, yet they work with the discipline of Spartans. Why are they so different?" "Don't overthink it. They aren't hostile. Let's just stay out of their way," Adrianx said, jumping down. Adrianx felt a growing unease toward the mercenaries. "I'm still going to reinforce our defenses," Syceta insisted. "Fine, we'll discuss it," Adrianx agreed, turning back. "Dracos, let's go." Dracos, his jaw throbbing, took one last look at my camp before following. Word spread that my men were the famous Greek mercenaries who had marched deep into Persia. The mercenaries, previously resentful, now viewed them with awe and hero worship. Realizing they were serving alongside such legends, the mercenaries' anger vanished, replaced by pride. Ignoring their leaders, they flocked to my camp, eager to hear tales of the Persian expedition. Meanwhile, Burkos faced the Thurii generals at City Hall. Thurii's government was a board of 10 generals, with one elected from each of the 10 original ethnic groups. After the Peloponnesian War, the Athenian descendants were expelled, leaving only 9 generals. Cunegurata had held power for years until the recent Lacanian defeat, which led to the election of Fears as chief general. Cunegurata held the contract. Burkos, what is the standard mercenary rate? Half a Daric gold coin per month, Burkos replied. Exactly, Cunegurata shouted. Yet you promised these 2,000 men 2 Darics. The generals gasped. And for 6 months. Cunegurata continued. Even if the war ends, we owe them 25,000 gold coins. Neansis added. The treasury is empty after last year's war and the cost of Tarentum reinforcements. I refuse to pay this. We reject this contract, the others agreed. Fears intervened. The Lacanians are gathering at Laos. They cannot sustain a long campaign. They will attack soon. We need these soldiers. Cunegurata countered. The contract is predatory. It makes the mercenaries guests and us servants. Burkos, did you have a private deal? I demand an investigation. Enough, Fears roared. You approved Burkos's appointment. He recruited 4,000 men in record time, ensuring our safety. Is this how we treat a patriot? Burkos added. I didn't realize the treasury's state, but these men are worth every coin. They are the equal of any Spartan. Neansis scoffed at the idea of a city-state training soldiers like Spartans, mockingly comparing them to the Persian immortals mentioned by Herodotus. Burkos retorted coldly that these mercenaries were indeed linked to the Persians. Fears asked with interest about the origins of this mercenary force. Burkos recounted his journey. After narrowly escaping pirates in the Adriatic, he reached Crete, where locals directed him to Asia Minor for mercenaries but advised obtaining Spartan permission. He traveled to Sparta to secure it. The generals grew tense, fearing Spartan retaliation for Thurii expulsion of Athenian descendants. Empty, Burkos explained he posed as a Thurian envoy to Sparta, where the Gerousia, while unable to send troops, provided the necessary recruitment permit. Fears and the others were relieved, concluding Sparta remained indifferent to Thurii internal politics. Cunegurata and the generals found comfort in this, using the permit as validation to soothe their guilt over the recent expulsions. Burkos continued, noting that while recruiting in Miletus, he heard of Cyrus the Younger's failed coup against the king of Persia. The generals were already aware of these events through trade networks and rumors brought by merchants to the mercenary camps. Burkos highlighted the mercenaries' prowess. They defeated the king's army, survived the retreat, and bested the forces of Tissaphernes and Orontes, proving their superior combat experience. A general gasped, realizing these were the legendary Greek mercenaries who had marched into Persia. Burkos confirmed, noting that Thurii's previous defeat by the Lacanians was due to both poor leadership and the citizens' lack of combat experience. In reality, the defeat resulted from the entire city's hubris and aggressive overextension into Lacanian territory. Burkos scapegoated the disgraced Axikaiakisi to satisfy the generals. He then described tracking the mercenaries to Heraclea and eventually Byzantium, narrowly beating Thybran's recruitment efforts by securing them with a signed contract and bribes. He explained that only my unit agreed to the high pay and terms, and he had to bribe Spartan envoys to bypass their interference. Fears praised Burkos's resourcefulness and courage, leading the generals in applause. The generals applauded, leaving Burkos momentarily speechless. Cunegurata sincerely apologized for his earlier suspicion, citing the city's financial strain. Burkos accepted the apology, followed by Neansis. Ansitanos suggested formally welcoming the mercenary leader. Cunegurata warned against overfamiliarity, arguing that mercenaries are outsiders who must be kept at a distance to maintain authority and avoid alienating other allies like Tarentum. Neansis agreed, emphasizing that they were merely hired freemen. Cunegurata reinforced that the employer-employee hierarchy must remain clear. Fears reluctantly agreed to treat them as standard mercenaries. Neansis then urged a discussion on the upcoming Lacanian threat. Cunegurata insisted they must strike before the Lacanians destroyed the newly sown crops. Fears cautioned against recklessness, noting their combined force of 9,000, including older citizens, was outnumbered by the Lacanians. Empty, Cunegurata argued that their previous defeat was due to unfamiliar terrain and on the Thurian plains, Greek hoplites would easily crush the disorganized Lacanians. Neancis warned that they could not afford a defensive war, as the citizens would refuse to pay war taxes for a prolonged siege. Polixenes pressured Fears to act, reminding him that he was elected to secure the city and that the mercenaries were their best hope. Fears was cornered. Cunagurata dismissed Burkos from the meeting to maintain secrecy. Outside, Burkos felt conflicted. He trusted Fears's experience, but desperately wanted the Lacanians defeated to protect his home. He hesitated to visit me, fearing political gossip, and returned home. I, unaware of the political maneuvering, focused on camp construction. Burkos sent 4 horses to me as a gesture of support. I sensed the city's distance but remained unbothered, viewing it as typical mercenary life. I left Felicius in charge and took assists, lades, and a guide to scout the terrain. The Sybaris plain was lush and vibrant in April. I observed the muddy roads and struggling slave caravans, noting the Greeks' lack of interest in road infrastructure compared to the future Roman network. 20 miles west along the Crathis River, they spotted the city of Thurii. The guide explained that Thurii was named after a natural spring found by the Athenians at the confluence of the Crathis and Koshines rivers. I noted the river was crowded with ships. Assists questioned why they hadn't rebuilt on the coast at Sybaris instead. I, already briefed by Burkos, chose to bypass the city. Thurii was divided into 3 sections by the rivers, with the main city in the north. They scouted the formidable 10-meter walls and deep moats, noting the heightened military alert. Assists joked with the sentries. They crossed a floating bridge, noting the hilly terrain between the rivers that prevented seasonal flooding. The terrain rose, shifting from mud to sandy soil. They reached the confluence of the Tino River and the Koshines. The guide noted the Thurians disliked the Tino. I became interested when the guide mentioned the upstream hot springs. They arrived to find a swampy, rocky area fed by numerous hot springs. The guide explained that seasonal runoff and flooding turned the area into a treacherous marsh. I observed a large, bowl-shaped riverbank. Empty, they descended into the riverbank, where the ground was soft and flat. Assists asked again why the area was disliked. The guide explained the hot springs bred swarms of biting insects. Assists peered into the mist-covered marsh. I studied the landscape, deep in thought. The riverbank ended, forcing them to dismount and walk up the slippery slopes. The vegetation grew dense, signaling the end of cultivated land. At a ridge, the guide refused to go further, fearing the proximity of the Lacanian camp. I persuaded the guide to take them to a better vantage point. Standing on a hill, I observed the Lacanians occupying a cleared, tent-filled area on the opposite slope. Even Assists, a veteran of Persian campaigns, remarked on their vast numbers. I observed silently before pointing ahead, asking, "What is that place?" The pale guide looked blankly, asking, "Where?" "On the right side of the hill, where Lacanian troops keep emerging," I clarified. The guide realized, "That is the mountain pass leading to Lacanian territory." "How long is it?" I asked. The guide explained it was over 40 li of difficult terrain, taking a day or 2 to traverse. He added fearfully that the Thurian army was ambushed and defeated there. I stared at the rugged mountains, lost in thought. Lade suggested, "Thurii should have built a fortress there to stop the Lacanians." The guide sighed, explaining that Thurii's old camp was neglected due to decades of peace and the harsh environment, leaving it vulnerable to the sudden invasion. I noted that the Greeks' lack of interest in mountain development made such a failure inevitable. Urged by the guide, the group began their return journey. The guide, a trusted slave of Burkos, asked if I believed they could defeat the Lacanians. "We shall see once we fight," I replied calmly. They traveled along the edge of the Sybaris plain, following a stream that merged into the Sybaris River. I spotted soldiers felling trees there, as Felicius had reported. At dusk, I halted my scouting, crossed the river, and joined the soldiers in hauling timber back to camp. After reviewing reports from Felicius and the officers, I sketched the terrain, memorizing the layout while planning further reconnaissance to map the plain and the Crathis River. Believing that a commander's success requires both talent and relentless effort, I continued my scouting the next day. They crossed the Sybaris River into a flatter region where Thurians cultivated olives and grapes instead of wheat. The guide mentioned the local wine's fame, reminding me of legends regarding the luxury of ancient Sybarites. The vineyards, however, were overgrown and abandoned. The guide explained that people fled due to roaming Lacanians from Amandalara. Assists remarked that Thurii should have protected its citizens. I countered that Thurii's depleted forces were likely focused solely on defending the city itself. The guide agreed, relieved to move on. Assists jokingly suggested they could provide protection for a fee. I sternly warned Assists against splitting forces, emphasizing that their priority was defeating the Lacanian army. Victory would resolve the Amandalara issue. They reached the Saraceno River, the border between Thurii and Amandalara. The guide, fearful of encountering Lacanians, urged them to turn back. I, intrigued, asked if the river was fordable. Assists immediately rowed into the water, crossing the 10-meter width easily. The water only reaches my thighs, Assists reported. I ordered Lades to fetch the 100 soldiers guarding the timber site to join them. Lades departed, leaving the guide to wait anxiously. Upon the soldiers' arrival, I felt emboldened and ordered the crossing. The guide followed, terrified of the Lacanians ahead. Empty, beyond the Saraceno, the terrain rose and narrowed. I deployed Assists and Lades as scouts on the left flank to prevent an ambush from the hills. The coastline shifted to steep cliffs and jagged rocks with crashing waves. I realized with disappointment that Amandalara lacked a harbor. Suddenly, the guide pointed ahead. Look, that is Amandalara. I spurred my horse forward, my soldiers quickly closing the distance behind me. I realized Amandalara was a mountain city, contrary to Greek tradition. Perched high, it overlooked the Gulf of Taranto, shrouded in morning mist. I pressed on to get a better look. My guide followed nervously. They were less than a mile from the city. Even if no Lacanians were visible, they were practically knocking on the enemy's door. A shallow, clear river, the Cisno, blocked their path, easily fordable on foot. This is the Cisno River, the guide pleaded. The Burano is just north. Amandalara lies between them. We cannot cross. I marveled at the Apennine Peninsula's water resources. The fertile soil, enriched by mountain runoff, made Magna Graecia far more prosperous than the rocky, arid Greek mainland. I studied the city, perched over 100 meters up with a gentle slope and a stone wall. The guide grew anxious as I lingered by the river, staring intently at the city. What is Amandalara's relationship with Thurii? Was it founded by their colonists? I asked. The guide, a well-traveled assistant to Burkos, explained. It was built by indigenous people, later occupied by Sybarites. After Croton destroyed Sybaris, it remained independent until it allied with Thurii to resist Tarentum. An alliance? I realized it was likely a nominal one, with Amandalara serving as a de facto vassal. At least it wasn't a direct colony. I had spent months learning that Greek city-states were not just isolated cities. They expanded by establishing villages and colonies to control surrounding lands and provide protection. While colonies initially obeyed their mother cities, their desire for independence often led to friction. If they remained close, they formed alliances. If distant, they often became rivals. So, the land doesn't belong to Thurii, I mused. How did the Lacanians capture it? The guide shrugged. Thurii was reeling from a crushing defeat and ignored Amandalara's pleas for help. The citizens vanished. Assist shouted, "Leader, someone is coming out of the city." Wezeba, the Lacanian chieftain of Amandalara, was agitated. Envoys from Gramentum had arrived, demanding he join the second Lacanian offensive against Thurii. Originally from the Agri River, Wezeba's tribe had fled south to the forests near Amandalara to escape Gramentum's aggressive expansion. Starvation and disease had decimated his people, including 2 of his sons. Gramentum's expansion had outpaced its food supply. After a brutal winter killed their livestock, they allied with Pixis, Nerulum, and Laos to attack Thurii for resources. Seeing an opportunity to save his tribe, Wezeba prepared to raid during the chaos. Then came news. Thurii's army had been annihilated. Seizing the moment, Wezeba led his tribe downriver to Amandalara. Note: Gramentum, Pixis, Nerulum, Laos. Note: Potentia. Wezeba intended to raid, but scouts reported Amandalara's residents were fleeing with their belongings. Wezeba attacked, seizing the city, its supplies, and its slaves, a victory he credited to the Mount Asanu god. Holding the city was difficult. He feared both a Thurian counterattack and the wrath of Akebelu, the vengeful great chieftain of Grimintum, for stealing his prize. Then, salvation. The Lacanian coalition besieging Thurii was struck by plague and retreated. Wezeba praised the Mount Asana god. Thurii, weakened, made no move to reclaim the city, granting Wezeba months of peace. This spring, Grimintum's envoy arrived, ordering Wezeba to join the second assault on Thurii. Wezeba agreed, though he sneered. The envoy ignored the city's ownership. He hoped for a stalemate between the Lacanians and Thurii, allowing his tribe to survive and consolidate power. He welcomed the arrival of mercenaries in Thurii. He ordered his men to stay inside and avoid provoking the Greeks. Today, scouts reported 100 Greek soldiers had entered their territory. Wezeba was stunned. Was this a vanguard? It didn't seem like Thurii's usual strategy. He climbed the wall to watch. The 100 Greeks stood motionless by the Cisno River. Scouts, Wezeba concluded. To intimidate them, he ordered his son Bagiel to lead 1,000 warriors out, leaving only 100 to guard the captives. As the Lacanians charged out, Assist cried, "Leader, look at their weapons." Assist stared in shock at the Lacanians, who were outfitted in Greek hoplite armor, helmets, round shields, and spears, mistaking them for a Greek force that had reclaimed Amendolara. I laughed, noting they had merely looted Amendolara citizens. They look the part, but they are far from true hoplites. Indeed, while Greek hoplites marched in tight, disciplined lines, these Lacanian warriors moved in a loose, ragged formation. The guide, terrified by the sight of the Lacanians exiting the city, was incensed by my casual demeanor. I finally ordered a retreat. The guide bolted, and the soldiers turned and began a steady jog backward. Assists, and Lades lingered, forcing the guide to wait awkwardly as we slowly withdrew. The Greeks retreated while the Lacanians followed at a distance, stopping only once I crossed the Saraceno River. I pondered the encounter, asking Assists if he believed the Lacanians in Amendolara intended to fight. Assists replied immediately that their hesitant pursuit proved they did not. I asked the guide for an estimate of the Lacanian numbers in Amendolara. The guide admitted that while rumors existed, no one truly knew the size of the occupying force. I smiled enigmatically and shifted the conversation. What lies north of Amendolara? The guide, now back on Thurian soil, explained that the Cini and Agri rivers led to the fertile Cirrus plain, where Thurii and Tarentum had once warred over control. Assists asked who had won. The guide explained that after long, indecisive conflicts, the two powers eventually signed a treaty to jointly establish Heraclea. Assists remarked that Thurii had once been quite formidable. The guide credited the Spartan general Cleandridas for past successes, dismissing their recent defeat by the Lacanians as the result of a cowardly ambush. I cut off Assists' urge to argue, insisting we head south to inspect the region. The guide was baffled by my relentless scouting of safe areas, though he was relieved to be away from the dangerous Lacanian front. Crossing a pontoon bridge west of Thurii, they encountered carts transporting copper and stone, which the guide explained were vital resources for the war effort. I noted the rugged road leading to the mines. The guide, suddenly reticent, hurried them toward the Crathis River Bridge to avoid further questions. The Crathis was swollen with spring runoff. They dismounted to lead their horses across the swaying pontoon bridge. Beyond the river lay a wide, green coastal corridor, clearly more secure than the north, where Thurian farmers still worked the land. 10 miles south, the corridor narrowed as the coastline became dominated by mudflats. The guide stopped, asking if they wished to proceed toward the territory of Castiglione. Note: Castiglione is near the site of ancient Cirrus, destroyed by Sybaris and Metapontum around 550 BC. Assists asked if Castiglione was a major city. The guide described it as a small, independent town founded by former Sybarites. I gazed south, reflecting on the irony that the once mighty Sybaris had been utterly destroyed by the weaker Croton. After a long silence, I ordered our return. Once the guide left, I asked my companions if they had ever seen a hunting dog confront a bear. They shook their heads, unfamiliar with the beast. I explained how a dog would bristle, growl, and feign attacks to appear dangerous, despite knowing it was outmatched, a display of posturing. Assist quickly realized the analogy. You mean the Lacanians in Amandalara? Exactly, I confirmed. They tried to intimidate us, but only revealed their weakness. I estimate they have barely 1,000 men. Lades, excited, asked if I intended to lead them in an assault on the city. Assists, aware of their secret mission, listened intently. I warned them to keep our plans strictly confidential, lest the Thurians or other rivals interfere with our goal of establishing a foothold. They agreed, with Assist joking that he would keep his mouth shut even in his sleep. I turned to my tasks. Lades, present, monitor the western camp and Amandalara daily. Gather detailed intelligence on the city's defenses without being detected. Can you do this? Yes. Lade saluted. Assists, present, secretly locate the citizens who escaped from Amandalara and bring them to our camp without alerting the Thurians. Understood. Burkos was stunned by my meticulous reconnaissance of the Thurii surroundings. Even Cleandridas, the Spartan general once hailed as a master strategist, never scouted personally or faced enemies alone like I did. Morris, what do you think of Davos? Burkos asked. Morris replied, Master, Leader Davos is very kind to us. As an Egyptian slave, Morris was used to the contempt of Thurii citizens. Yet, I treated him with consistent equality, never barking orders or looking down on him. Burkos nodded, agreeing that despite being a mercenary, I possessed remarkable refinement. Anything else? He pressed. He is always thinking and asking questions, Morris noted. He feels mysterious and unfathomable. Burkos shared this sentiment. He wondered if this was the aura of a God-favored man, though he remained skeptical of such rumors surrounding the mercenaries. And he is fearless. He doesn't seem to fear the Lacanians at all. Morris added. Burkos sighed. He is a veteran of great wars. Charging first and guarding the retreat is the mark of a great general, just like Cleandridas. But Davos is only 19. He recalled Archytas, the young Tarentine noble he met earlier. Archytas was humble, brilliant in mathematics, and had sincerely pledged to help Thurii repel the Lacanians. Archytas' promise was invaluable, given his experience defeating the fierce Messapians. He commanded genuine respect from his troops, much like I did. Burkos wondered if he should suggest to fears that I be granted Thurii citizenship. Days later, the mercenary camp was completed, allowing the soldiers to rest. Adrianx and Sicida arrived to visit me. I welcomed them warmly, putting our past friction behind us. I emphasized that both mercenary groups were in the same boat and must cooperate to survive and earn our pay. The soldiers had already begun bonding, sharing stories of the expedition. Being mostly from Ionia, they felt a natural kinship. The leaders, seeing this, encouraged the collaboration. I reached an agreement with Adrianx and Sicida to build a connecting passage between our camps for mutual support. Though Adrianx's green recruits were more likely to face trouble than the veterans, I agreed readily, earning the sincere gratitude and respect of the two leaders. Look, that's our leader, the God-favored Davos, a soldier boasted. He's so young, a soldier from Adrianx's camp asked skeptically. Age doesn't matter. He's killed Persian generals and fights like a lion. Even the Spartans fear him. Look how your own leaders respect him. Another soldier chimed in. He's incredibly kind to us. He never abandons the wounded. He saved me from death when I was struck by a Persian arrow, he said, proudly showing his scar. The visitor looked on with envy. I wish Davos led us instead. That night, Calixituoia visited me. Are you planning to annex those mercenaries? She asked. I truly want to help them, I insisted. Calixituoia laughed playfully. I leaned in and kissed her. Just as things heated up, Marcius called from outside. Leader, Mercis and Maligi are here to see you. I cursed under my breath, ready to turn them away. Calixituoia nudged me. If those two are here together, it must be important. I sighed and reluctantly let her go, stealing a few more kisses. Calixituoia pushed me away. Mercis and Maligi entered, unfazed by Calixituoia's presence, as their relationship was an open secret. They explained their purpose. Thurii merchants, hearing of the mercenaries, had begun visiting the old Sybaris site to trade. The mercenaries needed supplies, and the merchants needed customers. Mercis realized the merchants were fascinated by the exotic loot, Persian gold, ivory, and art that the mercenaries had kept from their campaign. To the Thurii merchants, these items were rare treasures. They clamored to buy them. Mercis consulted Maligi, who understood the cultural value of these items, to ensure they weren't undersold. Maligi suggested creating a managed marketplace to trade with the Magna Grecians and perhaps collect fees. Though hesitant about collecting taxes on foreign soil, Mercis was tempted by the profit and brought the idea to me. I saw the potential. A market would supply the troops, expand our influence, provide intelligence, and help scout for talent. Build it, I ordered. Maligi, you handle the construction and management. Keep it simple but functional. I instructed. It must be orderly, fair, and clean to attract more merchants. Don't collect taxes yet. We don't want to offend the Thurians, but charge for services like porterage or water. We can introduce shop fees later as it grows. Maligi praised my commercial wisdom. I smiled, thinking of modern concepts. I wondered if Maligi was truly ready to be a trade officer. I turned to Mercis. You handle the trade negotiations with the Magna Grecians. Understood. Mercis beamed. Do not touch the soldiers' personal loot without their consent, I warned. Sign agreements. Charge only a small fee, no more than 1/50th, and return the rest to the owners. No corruption. Maligi, you will oversee this. Davos, you're biased. 1/50th is too little, at least 1/20th. Selling goods is hard work, standing in the sun and talking until our throats are dry, Mercis complained. 1/20th is too much. 35th is the limit. That's final. I retorted. Instead of squeezing soldiers for money, find new trade items to expand your revenue. Mercis pondered, his face lighting up. The baggage train has people from Persia and Armenia who know the medical corps massage techniques. That's a novelty for Magna Graecia men. We can charge a premium. His excitement was cut short by Calixituoya's cough. I, amused by the awkwardness, suggested. Our medical corps doctors are skilled and currently idle. Why not have them open a clinic in the market? You can discuss the details with Calixituoya. 6 doctors, led by Hirpulasi, remained, drawn by my mysterious medical knowledge. Hearing Calixituoya's name, Mercis's face fell. Calixituoya, understanding Mercis's importance to Davos, discussed clinic logistics and fee distribution with him, but insisted he stop forcing baggage train women into prostitution. Mercis protested. Most of these women were captured along the way or are slaves managing pack animals. Only a dozen are actual prostitutes who are used to this way of earning. I doubt it's just those few, Maligi interjected. Note, while ancient Greeks lacked percentages, they were adept with fractions. For readability, percentages will be used hereafter. Shut up, Persian. I treated your wife and children well in the baggage train. Mercis snapped. Mercis, are you really only letting those dozen women serve guests? Calixituoya asked, blushing. Mercis admitted. Others lost their husbands in battle and, seeing the prostitutes earn easily while food is prioritized for soldiers, chose this to survive. Why not set them free? Calixituoya demanded. They are thousands of miles from home. If released, they'd just be enslaved by local tribes. Staying here is safer, Mercis claimed with feigned pity. This is the soldier's sin, I sighed, holding Calixituoya. Mercis, stop the forced labor. We'll provide free food, and once we settle in Magna Graecia, we'll marry them off to the soldiers. We won't be mercenaries forever. You are truly benevolent, leader, Mercis said, quickly retreating to avoid Calixituoya's gaze. News from the west grew dire as Lacanian camps expanded and Thurian farmers fled the Sybaris plain. When Lacanian scouts appeared near Thurii, the city's generals knew an attack was imminent. Burkos, tasked with a mission, arrived by boat at the Crathis River mouth, avoiding walking whenever possible. Landing, he saw a bustling dirt road leading to a large enclosure. What is that? Burkos asked Morris. The market the mercenaries built, Morris replied. Initially indifferent, Burkos decided to investigate since it was on his way. The market was noisy. 2 beautiful, non-Greek women greeted them in fluent Greek. Welcome, noble guests. Is this your first time? Morris nodded repeatedly. If you're selling, visit the management office inside to rent a stall for a small fee. How much? Burkos asked. 1 obol a day. Burkos was annoyed that mercenaries were profiting on Thurian land. However, All stalls are full. Please return tomorrow. Surprised by the demand, Burkos asked, "Can I pay extra to squeeze in?" "The fee isn't for profit, but for order. We ensure stallholders earn far more than 1 obol daily," the woman explained. Burkos and Moras were stunned by this modern business logic. She continued, "If buying, check the sign for our rules. If you encounter fraud, our office will resolve it for you." Unaccustomed to such customer-centric service, the pair curiously approached the management office. It was a simple wooden hut with a service window where staff answered questions. An Egyptian man politely asked Moras if he needed help. Before Moras could answer, a man with a hooked nose and beard pushed the door open. "Welcome, Burkos." Burkos looked puzzled. "I am Maliji, trade officer under Davos," he claimed confidently. Ignoring the title, Burkos corrected him. "I am just a common Thurian citizen. Are you Persian?" "Yes," Maliji replied proudly. "You have quite a mix of races here," Burkos noted, pointing to the scales. "What are those for?" "If a customer suspects short waiting, they can bring goods here to be weighed. If fraud is confirmed, the seller is penalized or banned," Maliji explained. "Interesting. Has that happened?" Burkos asked coolly, deciding to discuss the mercenaries' authority with their leader later. "It only happened once. We punished the offender, and it never recurred," Maliji said cautiously. "Why emphasize no spitting, no littering, keep stalls clean? No city-state market I've visited, not even the Athenian agora, has such rules." Burkos asked, intrigued. "That was my suggestion. I said markets are crowded. Filth causes stench and attracts flies, which ruins business and, most importantly, spreads disease," Maliji explained. "Is it really that serious?" Burkos asked, surprised. "Our leader is favored by Hades. My words carry weight. We employ 10 slaves to clean constantly. Despite our humble setup, we are cleaner than any city market. That's why we charge a small fee," Maliji added, justifying the cost. Burkos breathed in the fresh air, looking at the level ground, lost in thought. "I admire me. I'm not just a commander. I have a brilliant business mind. I suggested everything from the non-intimidating guards at the entrance to these scales. I'm the reason this market thrived in 20 days. If I weren't a mercenary, I'd be a great merchant," Maliji said sincerely. "Indeed, it is unexpected," Burkos replied, his mind elsewhere. He walked into the market, with Maliji acting as his guide. The first stall, belonging to the mercenaries, was large and crowded with exotic goods and fine gold and silver wares. "Mercis," Maliji called out. The fat man directing slaves turned, boasting. "Maliji here to congratulate me? I've sold plenty today." Seeing Burkos, Mercis smiled. "Burkos, look at this." He held up a shimmering silver chain adorned with gold flakes. Maliji winced, but Mercis hissed, "Don't say a word, Maliji." "What is that?" Moras asked curiously. Mercis smirked, gathering a crowd. "A gift from Cyrus the Younger to his favorite concubine, crafted by Persia's finest goldsmiths for intimate pleasures. Guess where she wore it?" "Below?" someone guessed. "Correct. You're experienced," Mercis laughed, drawing lewd chuckles. "She wore it every night. When Cyrus fell, his concubine was captured by the king of Persia, and this was left behind. Smell it. It might still have her scent. Buy it, and you can experience royal Persian pleasures with your own wife or lover." Even Burkos felt tempted. A merchant from Cilicium shouted, "How much?" "I'll take it." "It's pure gold, very heavy," Mercis said, jingling the chain. "Minimum 50 Derrick gold coins." Bidding escalated quickly. 55. 60. 65. Maliji was stunned by Mercis's profitable fabrication, though he kept quiet to avoid Calixituoya's potential disdain. As Burkos moved on, Maliji followed. "I see merchants from other city-states here," Burkos noted. "Yes, from Tarentum, Cilicium, Colonia, Croton, and others." Burkos flinched at the mention of Croton. Moras pointed to a group of strong men. "Those are your soldiers, right?" "Probably from the neighboring mercenary camp," Maliji replied. "Your soldiers seem quite wealthy, spending so freely," Burkos joked. "Mercenaries never know if they'll see tomorrow, so they enjoy their coin," Maliji said dismissively. Burkos sighed. "Life in these chaotic times is hard for everyone." Maliji remained silent. "In truth, my men were different. I managed the baggage train strictly, soldiers deposited wealth, named heirs, and could borrow interest-free from Mercis to avoid gambling or usury. Maliji knew the big spenders weren't my men. They had strict quotas for leaving camp and faced military law for overstaying. I had faced immense pressure to reform this army. Now, my soldiers were disciplined, constantly training or improving camp facilities, their eyes burning with a calm, focused intensity. Maliji compared them to the robotic Spartans or the undisciplined Persian levies. My men combined Spartan discipline with a desperate, survival-driven faith. If I commanded 20,000 instead of 2,000, that potential was why Maliji stayed. You sell everything here. Burkos interrupted. Even a blacksmith shop. Just for repairs, since Thurii won't let us enter, Maliji defended. And pottery. Cloth. Soldiers need clothes after 6 months of wear. And a stone masonry shop? For reinforcing our camp. A shipfitting shop. Don't tell me you're building a fleet. Burkos shouted, furious. You're robbing Thurii's market and wealth. Maliji hung his head, whispering, the volume of trade is quite small. Note, Cilicium is a city-state in Magna Graecia, south of Croton. Burkos fumed, realizing the market's diverse goods weren't for the mercenaries, but for local residents and merchants. By bypassing Thurii's taxes and port fees, the mercenaries created a cheaper, more accessible hub that attracted sailors, freemen, and traders from various city-states. Seeing Maliji's submissive posture, Burkos suppressed his anger. Forget it. I'll speak to me. You're just a Persian slave. You don't make the decisions. Maliji trembled with rage, mentally cursing Burkos for his ignorance. He had been a royal merchant for the king of Persia, not some common slave. He held his tongue and fell behind, choosing to avoid further interaction. Near the market's west gate, Burkos noticed a fenced-off area with a large wooden shed. Despite the surrounding chaos, this area was quiet, yet a long line had formed at the entrance. What is this? He asked. Maliji explained, it's a clinic. Our medics studied under me and are highly skilled. They've treated many local Thurii residents, making them very popular. Patients often linger until sunset. That effective? Burkos was skeptical, but Morris whispered, Master, perhaps the old mistress should be examined here. They might have a cure. Observing the long queue, Burkos nodded, then asked, Did I teach them medicine? Can I heal? Of course, Maliji replied proudly. The leader is favored by Hades and understands the mysteries of life and death. Unconvinced, Burkos left the market. Morris asked, Master, can one man truly be a master commander, a merchant, and a healer? I am, Burkos replied coolly. I am Hades' god-favored. A few hundred meters west lay the mercenary camp, a fortress with a 3-meter-deep trench, a 3-meter-high earthen rampart, and wooden palisades. Watchtowers stood 6 meters high, and the gate featured a crude watchtower. Large signs warned, traps ahead, stay on the main road. Morris noted the metallic glint in the tall grass, remarking, Master, even Thurii's defenses aren't this sophisticated. Burkos felt uneasy, wondering how the Crotonians would react to the mercenaries building a permanent fortress. After the guards verified their identity, assists escorted them inside. The camp was impeccably clean and organized. Wooden walkways lined the palisades, and the interior was divided by wide paths leading to a central, circular wooden enclosure. Assist explained, the center houses the baggage train and medical corps. If the outer walls fall, we retreat inside to continue the defense. The most complex and well-planned camp I've ever seen, Burkos admitted, despite his reservations. Assist smiled. Leader Davos says this is basic. War is unpredictable. A solid camp saves lives and morale. Sweat more in peace, bleed less in war. Burkos pondered the words. He realized he was meeting a seasoned commander. Was it right for Thurii's generals to impose plans on such a man without consultation? Morris asked about the lack of soldiers. They're at a tug-of-war competition, Assist replied. They followed the shouting to a wide field where over 1,000 soldiers were gathered in circles, cheering wildly. Go, Company 1, Platoon 2. Go, Company 5, Platoon 4. Pull. The atmosphere was electric, stirring Burkos's blood despite his initial detachment. Assist led them to a circle to watch while he went to fetch me. In the center lay a thick, 40-meter-long rope made of braided ship cables. An official shouted. Next round. Company 2, Platoon 3 versus Company 7, Platoon 1. Over 100 burly men entered the circle. Both sides grabbed the rope. Burkos noticed a red ribbon tied to the center, hanging over a white line with 2 other lines marked on the ground. The referee signaled, "Begin." The men pulled with all their might. The red ribbon swayed back and forth as the crowd roared, reaching a fever pitch. Finally, the ribbon crossed the left white line. The referee declared the winner. Assists returned, and Burkos left, still captivated by the spectacle. Empty. Burkos, long time no see. I thought you'd forgotten your old friend, I said, smiling as I approached. How could I? I've just been swamped with affairs since returning, Burkos replied. Oh, so you're finally free? I joked. Not finished yet, Burkos said sternly. But the Thurii City Hall has sent me with important orders for you. Oh, have the lords of Thurii finally remembered us mercenaries? I teased. Should I say it here? Burkos glanced around. My apologies, follow me to my command tent. I led them toward the center of the camp. Did you learn this tug-of-war game in Persia? Burkos asked. It was my idea. I wanted to keep the soldiers occupied to prevent trouble. It burns energy, builds fitness, and fosters teamwork. I even put up my own money for prizes. You manage these mercenaries well, Burkos praised, then pivoted. But don't worry, you'll have real work soon. I wasn't surprised. The Lacanians are at our doorstep. If Thurii didn't act, I assumed you were just handing over the land. Sensing my resentment, Burkos noticed a 4-meter stone wall inside the wooden perimeter. Are you building stone walls? The ground under the wooden wall is damp and unstable, so we reinforced it with scrap stone to prevent a breach. You and your men are formidable. You've turned a camp into a fortress, Burkos remarked, his tone implying criticism. We have no choice. We are few. If Thurii is besieged, we can help, but if we are besieged, who helps us? We must rely on ourselves. And the market outside, is that for defense too? It started for daily needs, but it grew. Don't worry, once we drive back the Lacanians, things will return to normal. Burkos decided not to press the issue of the market, as only the council could decide its fate. He moved to his mission. Scouts report the Lacanians will attack Thurii within 2 days. The Board of Generals has decided to meet them in battle and requires your participation. What is the plan? I asked with a sneer. I felt helpless. I was a participant in a major battle, yet had no say in the strategy. I missed the autonomy of my own command, feeling once again like a pawn in someone else's game. Burkos felt the same frustration. Fears had suggested involving mercenary leaders, but the other generals refused, fearing a repeat of the Dionysius incident in Syracuse, where mercenaries were used to overthrow the democratic faction. The Lacanian coalition has over 10,000 men. We have your 2,000, Dracos' 2,000, 1,500 Tarentum reinforcements, 4,000 from Thurii, and 200 cavalry, nearly 10,000 total. Burkos drew in the dirt. The plan is to place Tarentum on the right with Adrianx and Sycida's 1,000 men. The center is Thurii's 4,000, mostly men over 40, reinforced by Dracos' 1,000. Your experienced troops take the left with 100 cavalry. The other 100 cavalry join the right. I stared at the diagram in silence, making Burkos nervous. Want my opinion? I asked calmly. This configuration is balanced, aimed at a war of attrition to exhaust the enemy. Burkos nodded. That was exactly what Fears had explained. I've fought mountain tribes in Persia. They are fierce but disorganized. However, your generals are mistaken. Last year, the Lacanians captured 10,000 sets of Greek armor. They are better equipped than you think. My scouts estimate their force at 13,000. They will outnumber and outflank you. Your citizens fear them, and your center is half filled with old men. Who will break first? Burkos' confidence in the superiority of Greek hoplites began to waver. Want to hear my plan? I asked. Please, Burkos urged. Keep the formation, but put all 2,000 mercenaries and 200 cavalry under my command on the left. I will crush their right flank quickly, then pivot to hammer their center. Victory is guaranteed. Can you really guarantee a quick breakthrough? Burkos asked, tempted. Nothing is certain in war, but this plan has a much higher chance of success than yours. Burkos was silent for a long time. The generals believe in their plan. I will present your suggestion to Fears and the board, but they will decide. I looked disappointed, but rallied. If I can't have the 2,000 mercenaries, can I at least have all 200 cavalry? Burkos shook his head. Cavalry must be split between the wings. The Tarentum riders won't abandon their own countrymen. I sighed. How are the Tarentum reinforcements? Strong. Archytas has repelled the Messapians twice. They are as fierce as the Lacanians. Archytas, I muttered. Fine. Send all 200 cavalry to the right. Are you serious? Burkos asked, stunned. To me, war is a matter of life and death for a city-state. I am fully committed, even if this isn't my home. But the generals? Have they analyzed the enemy? Have they drilled the coalition to ensure we fight as one? My outburst shamed Burkos. He realized I was genuinely invested. Davos, I promise. After I visit Draco's, I will return to Fears and urge him to reconsider your plan. After Burkos left, I called for assists. How are the men doing with the grappling hooks on the stone wall? They can climb the stone walls easily now. The grappling hooks you designed are excellent climbing tools. That's great. I smiled slightly. Go to the market immediately. Tell Maligi I need 20 more sets, and have the blacksmiths finish them within 2 days. Understood, I'm going now. Late April, 399 BC. A warm, sunny morning, perfect for a spring outing. However, the Sybaris plain was thick with scouts and the tense atmosphere of impending slaughter. Inside the mercenary commander's tent, officers stood waiting. I scanned my veterans, Silas, Antonius, Capus, and newer recruits like Hieronymus and Agathias. All wore grave expressions. The Lacanians are marching on Thurii. We've been ordered to join them. Brothers, I said, smiling confidently. It's time to show these arrogant Thurians what our Greek expeditionary force is truly capable of. Who? The officers roared. As planned, Silas's 5th Hoplite Company and Alpens's 3rd Peltast Company, archers and slingers, will guard the camp against raids from Amendalara. The rest move out. Yes. As the Thurii army marched out, they found the mercenaries already waiting. Is this the Greek expeditionary force? Overrated. Look at them, lounging around, weapons discarded. They don't look like soldiers at all. Cunagurata complained, feeling he'd paid for shoddy goods. Fears, focused on the battle, ignored him. A young man nearby spoke up. Our messenger just left, and they're already ready. Their mobilization is impressive. Resting before battle shows experience. I believe they can hold the left flank. Cunagurata grunted and stayed silent. I, led by Burkos, rode toward them. General Fears. I, leader of the mercenaries, pay my respects. I saluted from my horse. I've heard of you, but your youth surprises me. Thank you for your help. Let us fight together today, Fears replied. As you wish, General. I turned to the other. And greetings to you, General Cunagurata. Davos, your proposal was bold and tempting, but the council deemed it too risky. Don't take it to heart. Cunagurata patted my shoulder to show camaraderie. Discussion is for planning. Execution is for the battlefield. I am a soldier. My duty is to obey. Well said, the young man exclaimed. I am Archytas of Tarentum. I've heard the legends of your force. Meeting you today does not disappoint. I looked at the refined, intelligent young man. Archytas, the mathematical and military genius of Tarentum. It is an honor to fight alongside you. I continued, mathematics and war are linked. Every soldier is a point. Together they form lines and squares. Victory depends on how each point is utilized. Exactly, Archytas asked. Do you study mathematics? I know little, but I hold the Pythagorean school in high regard, I replied. Archytas was visibly pleased. Fears interrupted. The other leaders are arriving. Let us finalize our orders. Note: Archytas is the second historical figure in this novel, renowned for his contributions to classical mathematics and mechanics, including early work on pulleys. The military signals were standardized. Fears assigned the 200 cavalry to Archytas, who thanked me for my support. Burkos wondered why I praised the Pythagoreans, knowing they were unpopular in Magna Graecia outside Tarentum. He feared it might hurt my standing with Fears and Cunagurata. As the meeting ended, I rode back, observing the troops. The Tarentine reinforcements were fit and relaxed, while the Thurian citizen soldiers looked older and weary. I frowned. noticing men in leather armor and some even naked. Burkos, your numbers are higher than 4,000. Those are freemen and foreigners, Burkos explained proudly. The assembly promised them citizenship if we win. We have about 6,000 now. I was relieved. Many freemen in Thurii then. This is only a fraction. Many are still watching, Burkos added. The Thurii coalition marched in 3 columns along the Krathus River. A messenger arrived. General Fears orders you to halt and form ranks. Understood, I said, signaling my trumpeter. The horns sounded, and the mercenaries halted and deployed. The columns shifted quickly into a phalanx formation. I placed Kapuz's first hoplite company on the right to anchor with the center. Amintez led the third on the left, supported by peltasts to prevent flanking. Though the phalanx was only 4 ranks deep due to limited numbers, I trusted my veterans. The center and right wings deployed. Fears placed Dracos's 1,000 mercenaries in front, followed by citizens, soldiers, and freemen. Arcadus positioned the Tarentine citizens in front, with mercenaries behind and cavalry on the far right. As the lines formed, priests prayed to Apollo, Poseidon, and the local heroes. My men, having witnessed my miracles, prayed to Hades. The Lacanians are less than 3 miles away, Cunegurata said nervously. No rush, Fears replied. They need time to deploy. Cunegurata stepped back. Soon, a golden tide appeared on the horizon. Cunegurata gasped. They've taken our armor and weapons, just as you predicted. Don't worry, Fears said calmly. They haven't mastered our phalanx. Let them come, let our men rest. The sun is in our eyes, Martoris grumbled. It'll make throwing javelins difficult. Ask the Thurians to pray to Apollo to hide the sun, Oliverus joked. Better to ask Davos to have Hades turn day into night, Epitines added. The mercenaries joked, unfazed by the enemy numbers. The Lacanian coalition halted 2 miles away to form ranks. Both sides wanted this decisive battle. The Greeks allowed them to deploy, preferring a set-piece battle over a futile chase. The Lacanians deployed 16,000 men, 6,000 under Akebelu in the center, 4,500 on the left, and 5,500 on the right under Sensing. Akebelu, an experienced commander, planned to crush the Greek left flank, which he perceived as the weakest link, with his superior numbers. The Lacanian formation was loose and sprawling. Horns sounded, and the massive army began its advance. Fears dismounted and called for his armor. A commotion broke out. Fears looked on in horror as hundreds of soldiers from the left flank charged toward the enemy. Are they deserting? Epitines and Zippite led 600 peltasts forward. They weren't surrendering. They were executing my tactic, using light infantry to harass and disrupt the enemy before the main clash. Despite the overwhelming odds, the veterans remained disciplined, their speed increasing as they closed the distance. At 400 meters, they shouted, "Slingers, ready!" Peltasts halted to prepare their slings, while archers stopped at 100 meters. 400 peltasts kept running. Geninate of Pixis, known for leading from the front, was initially puzzled by these Greeks in loose formation. Having fought the nearby Hellenes, he was familiar with Greek tactics, but this was unprecedented. Suddenly, as the Greeks raised their spears, he shouted, "Watch out for javelins. Defend." Hundreds of javelins whistled through the air. The experienced peltasts threw them at an angle. The Lacanians, despite their Greek-style gear, lacked the shield each other discipline, leaving gaps in their lines. My heavy-tipped javelins pierced these gaps, striking the Lacanians' ribs through their linen armor and causing heavy casualties. Geninate blocked a javelin with his shield, the metal tip piercing the bronze plating. As he struggled to pull it out, a comrade screamed, "Watch out for arrows." Arrows and stones rained down. Geninate was struck in the head. Despite his helmet, the impact left him dizzy and nearly collapsed. While the Lacanian losses were moderate, the barrage caused chaos in their right wing. The peltasts launched a second, deadlier volley. Fears and Cunegurata watched in shock, stunned by the effectiveness of my novel tactics. Seeing the Lacanian right wing shattered, Cunegurata exclaimed, "If we had known these mercenaries were this capable, we should have adopted their tactics sooner." Fears shook his head, noting their own light infantry lacked the courage to operate independently of the phalanx. He regretted not giving me the extra 2,000 mercenaries, but resolved to stick to the original plan. Prepare for combat. The enemy is attacking. Fears warned, dismounting to don his helmet. These brothers are incredible. True heroes who fought in Persia and returned. One soldier cheered. Look at those slingers, they're my fellow Rhodians. And us Thracians, look at the accuracy of their javelins. I want to drop this heavy armor and join them. Dracos gripped his shield strap, his fighting spirit ignited. Come on, you savages, taste our strength. Sensing, the great chieftain of Pixis, was stunned that his forces were battered before contact. His javelin throwers were forced to the rear, unable to retaliate against the dispersed, hidden enemy. Desperate, he ordered his wings to squeeze toward the center to surround the Greeks, inadvertently causing the Lacanian center and left to accelerate their advance in fear. 10,000 warriors charged, the ground trembling under their feet. Archytas, Fears, Dracos, and other commanders roared, "Shield wall, defend." The phalanx locked into place, front ranks braced, shields overlapping, spears leveled. The formation became a massive, bristling metal beast. Bolstered by a 100-meter charge and the rising terrain, the Lacanian warriors slammed into the Greek phalanx. The Battle of Thurii began in late April 399 BC. While local, this clash would mark a turning point in Mediterranean history, unnoticed by the preoccupied powers of Carthage, Syracuse, Rome, Sparta, Persia, Athens, and Macedonia. Impulsive Lacanian mountain tribesmen, particularly from Gramintum, ignored orders to shield bash and instead leaped directly into the Greek spears. This reckless tactic disrupted the Greek defensive formation. The Greek center, composed of uncoordinated Thurii citizens and Dracos' mercenaries, struggled against this unconventional assault. On the right, the Tarentine citizen soldiers held firm against the less aggressive Nerulum and Laus warriors. Meanwhile, 200 cavalry harassed the Lacanian left, preventing them from committing fully to the attack. The Lacanian right wing formed a crescent, with Sensing losing control. As he signaled a final charge, the Greeks responded with a rhythmic horn blast. Geninate, seeing the Greeks tilt back to throw, instinctively curled behind his shield. 1,000 javelins decimated the charging Lacanians, halting their momentum. The Greeks roared, "Hades!" and charged forward. The mercenaries launched a fierce counterattack, their formation moving like a powerful, lashing tail. The Lacanian front line, still reeling from the javelins, was shattered by the mercenaries' shield bashes and precise spear thrusts. The sheer efficiency of the slaughter terrified the rear ranks, forcing the Lacanians to retreat. Note: Vergae is the northernmost town of the Brutii, bordering Laos. Sensing, seeing his troops fleeing, panicked. He needed to stabilize the right wing to prevent a total collapse and feared the wrath of the Gramintum chieftain, Ekebalu. He turned to his remaining Brutii reserves. Get the men from Vergae. Tell their leader that if this battle is lost, the Lacanians will not forgive them. Sensing commanded, "Great chieftain, the Lacanians are arrogant. They refused our help, and now they blame us for their failure," the young Saru complained. Sidorums watched the battle silently. The Greeks are winning despite their numbers. Let's leave. Maybe we can break away from the alliance, Saru suggested. Sidorums sighed. If the Lacanians lose, they still control the mountains. Unless we migrate south like our kin in Kazinsa, we are stuck. Order the men to close ranks and push from the right. 2,000 Brutii, in tight formation, reinforced the collapsing Lacanian right. The Brutii push stabilized the Lacanian line, forcing the retreating soldiers back into the fray. The mercenaries, their initial momentum spent, were forced to retreat slowly to maintain their thin line. I, watching from horseback, felt a pang of regret for not securing more reinforcements, but remained calm, focusing on managing the retreat. The Greek line was being flattened. I realized my men were exhausted from the intense combat. With the center and left failing, and only a marginal advantage on the right, I began planning for a potential withdrawal. The battle, involving nearly 30,000 men, was turning against the Greeks due to underestimated Lacanian numbers and the recent arrival of the Vergae reinforcements. The Thurii commanders had underestimated the Lacanians, who had grown stronger and more disciplined through recent tribal wars. The Greek center, a mix of mercenaries, citizens, and freemen, lacked cohesion and began to fracture under the pressure, with each group prioritizing its own survival over the collective victory. As the Greek center collapsed, the Lacanians exploited the gaps, routing the phalanx. I, suppressing my disappointment, ordered a retreat using a unique signal, a long blast followed by a charge melody. Confused, the Lacanians hesitated, allowing the mercenaries to create distance and perform a disciplined withdrawal, with peltasts firing javelins to cover their movement. Empty, the Tarentum reinforcements retreated successfully under cavalry protection, but the Greek center remained in total disarray. Hippus, usually eloquent, panicked, asking Fears what to do. Fears bitterly admitted his failure, taking full responsibility for underestimating the enemy and ignoring advice. Acknowledging his stubbornness caused Thurii defeat. Determined, Fears ordered Hippus to return to Thurii to organize defenses. He then rallied his guards, slaves, and clansmen, shouting for Thurii, and charged back into the enemy to buy time for the city. Hippus hesitated but fled on horseback, convincing himself that someone needed to survive to protect Thurii. Fears's 800-man force shocked the Gramentum warriors with their suicidal ferocity, nearly breaking their formation. Ultimately, the Gramentum forces surrounded and annihilated the group. Every one of the 800, including Fears, died fighting. Hippus fled toward Thurii, regretting his pursuit of glory. The city, only miles away, was in a state of desperate prayer. When scouts reported the defeat, chaos erupted. Citizens fainted, rioted, or panicked, fearing the city's imminent destruction. With the 9 generals absent, Neansis and others stepped up, maintaining order with patrols and arming every citizen, man and woman, to defend the walls. Hippus and several nobles arrived at the drawbridge. Surrounded by desperate citizens, Hippus ignored their pleas, shouting for the gates to be closed to prevent the Lacanians from entering. Neansis questioned the order, noting the soldiers outside would be trapped. Hippus proposed the soldiers bypass the walls and jump into the Crathis River, where boats would rescue them. Knowing the Lacanians couldn't swim, the plan was adopted. The gates were closed, and citizens signaled the retreating soldiers to jump into the river. I sent assists to the camp to report while I led my troops back, with Lades carrying the banner. The mercenaries retreated smoothly, despite being joined by panicked, disorganized Thurian soldiers. I ordered Lades to tell the Thurians to seek refuge at my fortified camp. Lades departed. I steered my troops toward the south gate to avoid congestion. Geninate, leading the Pixis warriors, pursued them with intense, vengeful rage. The Pixis and Gramentum forces collided, delaying their pursuit and allowing my mercenaries to enter their camp safely. The Thurian generals had underestimated the difficulty of their rescue plan. While some soldiers jumped into the river, others refused, pleading at the gates. When the Gramentum warriors arrived, the ensuing slaughter forced the remaining soldiers into the water, where many drowned in their armor. The sight of their kin dying haunted the Thurians. I, seeing my camp's entry order disrupted by fleeing Thurians, climbed the wooden wall and used force to restore discipline, ensuring my troops entered safely. Empty, the Lacanians appeared on the horizon. I immediately ordered my centurions to execute the defensive plan. The units moved to their assigned positions on the wooden walls and the drill ground. I asked Felicius about the Thurian refugees. Felicius reported nearly 400, mostly unarmed freemen. I summoned Mercis to check the javelin supply. Mercis noted they had 526 javelins, bought with all their market earnings. I ordered them distributed to the refugees to assist in the defense. Felicius complied, but Mercis hesitated. I reassured him they would recover the weapons from the defeated Lacanians. Relieved, Mercis ordered the slaves to distribute the arms. The mercenaries watched the approaching enemy calmly, confident in their defenses. Matones asked if the complex camp construction was worth it. Hippus excitedly confirmed, eager to see the traps in action. The mercenaries rested, while the Scylla's 5th Company eagerly awaited the fight. The Pixis warriors resumed their pursuit. Geninate roared for his men to charge. The warriors accelerated, their fatigue forgotten in their bloodlust. Archers on the watchtower alerted Alpins that the enemy was within 200 meters. Alpins ordered the slingers to prepare. At 100 meters, the mercenaries cheered. Jin'inate gripped his shield, unaware of the trap. He stepped on a hidden iron spike, suffering a severe wound. He realized the spikes were anchored deep in the ground. Jin'inate bandaged his leg and warned his men. The mercenaries cheered as more warriors fell to the traps. I explained the caltrops to the veterans, who viewed me with increased awe. The Lacanians slowed, but the mercenaries' ranged fire forced them into more traps, including deep pits with sharpened stakes. Sensing arrived to find his men terrified and stalling. Jin'inate reported the traps and the heavy casualties. Sensing scolded his men for their cowardice. Seeing his son's injuries, Sensing's tone softened. Jin'inate insisted they could not continue the assault. Sensing ordered the Bruttians to attack. The Vigians, led by Sidorums, agreed to attack in exchange for the Pixis warriors' shields. Sensing agreed. The Vigians advanced cautiously along the path, using shields to protect themselves. They reached within 50 meters of the gate. The mercenaries' archers and slingers opened fire from multiple angles, devastating the Vigians and forcing them to scatter into the traps. Sidorums refused further attacks. The mercenaries, frustrated by the lack of direct combat, began jeering at the enemy. I noted the high morale. I realized the Lacanians, exhausted and lacking siege experience, had been halted by my camp's defenses, proving my strategy successful. I analyzed the battle to refine my defensive tactics, then dispatched assists through the tunnel to scout the camp of Dracos and his men. Reports were encouraging. Inspired by the mercenaries' diligence, Dracos, Adrianx, and Sicida had deepened their trenches and reinforced their walls. While lacking complex traps, these defenses proved effective against the enemy. The arrival of Tarentum reinforcements further bolstered the morale of the retreating mercenaries. After suffering casualties and finding the mercenary defenses impenetrable, the warriors from Nerulum and Laos abandoned their assault, proving far more pragmatic than the vengeful Picosis. With safety secured, I turned my focus from the battlefield to the mercenaries' future. The coalition's defeat made it unlikely they could take Thurii. I knew the city's 6-meter moat and 10-meter walls were insurmountable for the Lacanians, who lacked siege equipment, experience, and naval control of the Crathis River. The Lacanians aimed to settle the fertile Sybaris plain. While Thurii was temporarily crippled, they still held the southern bank to regroup. For me, however, the situation was dire. My failure made my mercenaries a primary target, and I refused to be a mere pawn for Thurii. Yet, leaving Magna Graecia meant abandoning my dreams. Meanwhile, Wysaba, the Lacanian leader of Amandalura, panicked upon learning the coalition's strength exceeded 15,000. After consulting elders and a priest, he was reassured by a prophecy of danger followed by safety. Wysaba sent an envoy with wine and food to the Sybaris plain, hoping to appease the great chieftain of Gramentum. If the gesture failed, he planned to retreat into the mountains. Sensing, frustrated by his failure, scouted the mercenary camp. He found it heavily fortified with traps, trenches, and tunnels, rendering a direct assault impossible. Resigned, he withdrew his tribesmen to await Akebelu. Akebelu finally arrived with his main force, having struggled to rally his 6,000 warriors after their pursuit of the Thurian route. The Gramentum warriors had slaughtered the Thurian stragglers, with some even attempting to cross the moat before being repelled by the city's defenders. Akebelu abandoned thoughts of taking Thurii and regrouped, only to be shocked by the battered state of Picosis's forces. Sensing recounted his tribe's heroic struggle, blaming the mercenaries' cunning and the Vigians' sabotage for his losses. Sidorums, leader of the Vigians, vehemently denied the accusations. He argued that the Vigians had actually saved the right flank when Picosis collapsed, and that any injuries to Picosis soldiers were accidental results of restoring order to the lines. Sensing erupted in rage, accusing the Bruttians of cowardice and late arrival. He demanded Jin'inate confirm the number of casualties. Under his father's glare, Jin'inate hesitantly admitted that about 150 men were killed, all stabbed in the back. The revelation sparked immediate, lethal tension between the Picosis and Vigian warriors. Both leaders looked to Akebelu for a verdict. Akebelu knew the Vigians had held back, but he also valued the Picosis as his primary allies. Punishing Sinsing would alienate his strongest Lacanian support, so he chose to maintain the alliance. He also needed the Vigians as a bridgehead into Brutium. He declared that while all would share in the spoils, the Vigians must pay a heavy fine and offer human sacrifices to compensate Picosis for the betrayal. The Vigian warriors erupted in outrage at the demand. Grimentum and Picosis soldiers immediately surrounded them. Akebelu stared coldly at Sidorums, demanding his submission. Sidorums stood silent, pale and trembling, his fists clenched. Saru shouted in defiance, urging his men to refuse the insult and return home. The Vigian warriors echoed his call, their anger boiling over. Sinsing sneered, suggesting to Akebelu that the Bruttians were unreliable and should be dealt with. Sidorums saw the cold, murderous intent in the eyes of his allies. Surrounded by superior numbers and better-equipped Lacanians, Sidorums felt his spirit break. He choked out a forced agreement. The cries of his betrayed men shattered Sidorums, who collapsed to the ground. Akebelu appointed Udal to oversee the punishment, hoping to avoid further friction between the tribes. Udal accepted the task. Akebelu then offered a carrot: land on the Cyberus plain for the Vigians once the area was conquered. Sidorums thanked him, masking his grief. Akebelu then turned his attention to Geninate, asking about his wounds. Geninate stood tall, claiming they were mere scratches. Akebelu laughed, joking about his daughter's future as a widow, which embarrassed Geninate. Sinsing was relieved. Akebelu's favor toward his son-in-law meant the alliance remained intact. A taunt rang out from Savella, a Grimentum leader, mocking the greatest warrior for being bested by Greeks. Savella, a former suitor of Akebelu's daughter, harbored deep resentment toward Geninate. Geninate retorted, challenging Savella to try taking the camp himself. Provoked, Savella prepared to charge, calling his men forward. Akebelu's stern voice silenced the young leader. Enough. We return to camp. Sinsing protested, questioning why they weren't continuing the assault. Akebelu noted the coming dusk and the exhaustion of his troops. He declared they would build a city tomorrow, confident they could starve out the mercenaries or defeat them if they emerged. Udal asked if they were abandoning the march on Amandalera. Akebelu planned to go tomorrow. He was wary of the mercenaries' strength and feared that attacking a fortified mountain city at night with unstable Vigian allies was too risky. He warned that if Amandalera didn't submit, he would crush them tomorrow. Sinsing twitched at the implication. The Lacanians retreated. Amidst the soldiers' cheers, Felicius found me in my tent, obsessively drawing and pacing, oblivious to the world. Felicius watched as I sketched a map of Thurii, the Crathis and Koshini's rivers, and mysterious points near the Tino River. I suddenly shouted in a strange tongue, my face flushed with excitement. Felicius wondered if I was speaking to Hades. I snapped back to reality, ordering Felicius to summon all officers immediately. After Felicius left, I stared at my map, whispering, victory or defeat, it all rests on this battle. I'm betting everything. I wiped the map away, sitting down to compose myself while awaiting my officers. The tent was cramped as the officers gathered, their faces etched with anxiety about their future. They looked to me, their miracle-working leader, for guidance. I addressed them, we lost. The Lacanians will return tomorrow. They crave this plain and won't give up after their hard-won victory over Thurii. What do we do? I revealed my secret. Amandalera is our target. It is the home I have chosen for us in Magna Graecia. Most officers remained calm, though a few looked surprised. But if the Lacanians hold the plain, Amandalera will be a target. We are too few and too weak to survive their constant threat. How do we solve this? Matonis shouted. We defeat them. Amintas agreed, arguing they could win if they split the enemy forces. Both men were fearless, ready to charge 10 times their number. Capus, Alexis, and Felicius looked skeptical, preparing to argue. I laughed. We must attack, but not by splitting them. We must annihilate the entire coalition. Only then can we settle in Amandalera, defy Thurii, and live in peace. The room fell silent, stunned by the audacity of the plan. Felicius voiced the collective doubt. Leader, we are only 2,000. How can we possibly annihilate an army of 10,000? It's not just us. We have the Tarentum reinforcements and Draco's mercenaries. Even with them, We only have 6,000 men, Kapuz countered, shaking his head. The Lacanian tribal coalition has over 15,000, more than double our strength. Are the Tarentum reinforcements and those mercenaries even willing to attack the Lacanians? Antonius asked, hitting the crux of the matter. They don't know yet, but I'll convince them, I said confidently. Seeing their skepticism, I added, brothers, remember, victory isn't about numbers. It's about troop quality, morale, equipment, and, most importantly, a meticulous plan. We must dictate the pace, exploit our strengths, and negate theirs to secure victory. The men grew thoughtful. Amintas urged, tell us the plan. I called out, assists, bring the map of Thurii. Assists promptly brought the map, which had been meticulously surveyed and drawn on parchment over the past few days. I spread the map on the wooden table, and the men crowded around. Look here, this is the Lacanian camp, and here is the Tino River, I said, detailing my tactical plan with slow, deliberate precision. The men listened intently, deep in thought. When I finished, silence filled the tent, followed by quiet murmurs. I waited a moment before asking, brothers, is this plan feasible? Leader, Alexis praised sincerely. I've never seen such a brilliant, genius plan. Alexis is right, another added. This plan neutralizes their numerical advantage and allows us to unleash our full offensive power. The leader is truly a great commander and a god-favorite of Hades. The tent filled with waves of adulation. I cut them off solemnly. This is a matter of life and death, not a time for flattery. We need your wisdom to overcome the challenges ahead. The men exchanged looks. Alexis cleared his throat and said seriously, Leader, according to your plan, our first hurdle is how to lure the enemy out. After a heated discussion, the battle plan was finalized, and the atmosphere in the tent turned spirited. I declared, brothers, the battle is near. Tell the soldiers the truth we've kept hidden. This fight isn't for Thurii or for us officers, but for themselves, for the land we all dream of. Hades will protect us. Huzzah! My words ignited their passion. Even the usually composed Felicius burned with the fire of hope. As Archytas walked through the camp, the cheers and excitement from every tent were infectious. Even he, despite his heavy heart, was moved. This mercenary force was truly a legendary unit that had troubled even Persia. Their high morale after a defeat was remarkable. Archytas' desire to see me grew stronger. Outside the tent, the young man greeted him. General Archytas, we plan to attack the Lacanian tribal coalition tomorrow. We hope for the support of the Tarentum reinforcements. Archytas couldn't believe his ears. You mean to attack the Lacanian tribal coalition? Yes. The 15,000-strong coalition to the west, not just the Lacanians in Amendolara? Archytas pressed. Correct, the Western coalition. I nodded firmly. Archytas stared at me, suppressing his excitement. How do you intend to do it? I brought him inside to the map. After detailing the plan, Archytas pondered for a long time before saying, It is a bold, high-stakes plan, but it is feasible and highly tempting. Will the Tarentum reinforcements join us? I asked. Archytas remained silent. Seeing my calm expression, he remarked, It seems you were certain I would agree. Heraclea is Tarentum's ally, I noted. If we win, Tarentum can focus entirely on the Messapians. In truth, Heraclea was a Tarentine satellite state, and its fall would threaten Tarentum's western flank, a primary reason Tarentum sent reinforcements in the first place. Archytas finally nodded. Tarentum is honored to fight alongside the Greek heroes who conquered Persia. That is excellent. Your strength is why I dared to propose this, I said sincerely. After discussing details, Archytas added, Davos, I have a suggestion. Please speak. I replied, noting his serious tone. Regardless of tomorrow's outcome, I invite you to become a citizen of Tarentum. I will personally recommend you to the Senate for a high administrative post. I was caught off guard. I've heard it's difficult for foreigners to become citizens of a major city-state. It is, Archytas admitted. But someone of your talent would be welcomed anywhere in Magna Graecia. These are colonies, not Athens. The key is having the eye to recognize talent. He gestured to his own eyes. Just me, not my brothers? I asked, seeking a reason to decline. That would require a vote by the Assembly of Citizens, which is very difficult. Archytas explained. Thank you for the invitation. I will consider it after tomorrow's battle, I said, feigning seriousness. Adrianx, Sicida, and Dracos arrived to hear my proposal. They were all shocked by the plan. Having suffered heavy casualties, especially Dracos' 2,000-man unit, which lost 400, Adrianx and Sicida were hesitant about further risks. Leader Davos, I will join tomorrow's battle, Dracos suddenly declared, surprising the others. The Lacanians aren't scary. The Thurians just dragged us down today. With you, we will make them taste defeat. Dracos insisted. I was impressed by Dracos' resilience. Turning to the others, I said, we aren't fighting for Thuriai's meager pay. We are fighting to retake Amyndalara and become its masters. The trio was stunned. You're sure we can take Amyndalara? Sicida asked. We've conquered many fortresses in Persia. A small mountain city is no problem, I said confidently. We will invite you to become citizens of Amyndalara and secure land in the wealthy Magna Graecia. Unless, of course, you prefer returning to the poverty and war of Ionia. Are you serious? We'd really get land. Adrianx stammered. Of course, this is our collective decision, I replied solemnly. But, Adrianx asked, struggling to contain his excitement, won't Thurii and Tarentum object? I dismissed Thuriai's inability to resist, noting that Tarentum would likely welcome their presence as a buffer against mountain tribes. The three men agreed in unison. We are willing to join you. Excellent. I cheered. We are family now. Let us fight for our future together. After finalizing the plan, I warned them to keep it secret from the Tarentines for now. As I prepared to send word for Burkos to visit, a guard announced that Burkos had already arrived at the camp gate. I was surprised, immediately sensing Thuriai's desperate need for my services. Burkos entered the tent and urgently asked, Leader Davos, do you still intend to honor our original agreement? I feigned difficulty, citing heavy losses, lost equipment, and injured men. I claimed my officers were demanding to leave, even without pay, because they couldn't hold against the Lacanians. Empty. Burkos panicked, begging me to stay. He offered double pay and promised to supply weapons and labor from Thuriai's slaves to replace my losses. I remained cold and unmoved. Burkos frantically added, I will provide as many strong, young slaves from our mines as you need. I pondered before reluctantly agreeing, provided Thurii supplied the food to sustain the slaves. Burkos agreed to everything. That night, Thurii mobilized, sending ships laden with supplies, weapons, and slaves to the camp. By dawn, I inspected my refreshed, high-spirited troops. Matonis, are you ready? I asked my veteran comrade. I can't wait. Matonis shouted. I challenged them. We must kill 3 enemies each to ensure victory. Are you capable? Yes. The soldiers roared, with Matonis adding that 3 wasn't enough. I mounted my horse and addressed my men. I see hope in your eyes. Today, we turn that hope into reality. Hades will protect you. Victory, the men cheered. I turned to Felicius. I await your good news. With Hades' protection, we will succeed. Felicius replied. As the mercenaries marched into the fog, I felt the weight of my fate. Assists, back to camp. Prepare. Yes. Assists responded. On the walls of Thurii, a sentry heard the sound of marching. Are the Lacanians attacking? His companion panicked. They rang the alarm, but when the citizen soldiers arrived, the area outside was silent. Fearing the fog, the cavalry refused to scout until the sun cleared the air. By morning, the Lacanian coalition prepared to march on the Sybaris plain. Suddenly, a sentry rushed in. The enemy is here. The Lacanians watched in shock as the enemy approached. 200 Greek hoplites stopped 100 meters away and began tossing circular objects into the camp. They were the severed heads of Lacanian warriors left behind the previous day. The Greeks then urinated and jeered at the camp. Enraged, over 1,000 Lacanian warriors charged out. The Greeks retreated, luring the Lacanians into an ambush where 2,000 hoplites waited. A volley of javelins and a disciplined charge shattered the Lacanian morale. The Greeks systematically executed the fleeing warriors. Witnessing the slaughter, the Lacanian leaders were furious and demanded to attack. Genonate shouted, I recognize them. They are the mercenaries from yesterday. Akebelu was stunned. Are you sure? I would never forget them. Geninate replied. Savella requested 3,000 men to avenge their fallen kin. Geninate also stepped forward to request battle. Akebelu declared, since they dare to provoke us, we shall wipe them out here and then march on the Cyberus plain. The leaders cheered, except for Sidorums of Verge. Akebelu glared at him. Do you have an objection? Sidorums replied bitterly. I obey, but after last night, my warriors refused to fight. What? Akebelu glared. Sidorums explained. They say if they are to be killed, they'd rather be killed by their own than die exhausted in battle. Sensing jumped in. The Verge are treacherous. Arrest them. Sidorums paled. Akebelu silenced Sensing. Enough. If the Verge won't fight, they will stay behind to guard the camp. Sidorums exhaled in relief. Ignoring Sensing's protests, Akebelu impatiently ordered the Pixis warriors to guard the camp with the Vigians, tasking them with transporting supplies to the Cyberus plain once the Greeks were defeated. Sensing complied, even silencing his son Geninate's objections. However, Akebelu remained resentful. He had only wanted Sidorums to execute a few wounded Vigians, but Sensing's insistence on sacrificing 150 had alienated the Vigians. Seeing Sidorum's stoic expression, Akebelu knew the Vigian issue required attention, but the Cyberus plain was his priority. He left the Vigians under Pixis surveillance for now. As the horns sounded, Lucanian warriors poured out of the camp to form ranks. The Greeks ceased their pursuit, regrouping and advancing slowly. Excluding the Pixis and Vigians, over 9,000 warriors from Grimentum, Nerulum, and Laos formed a line several miles long, their formation process sluggish. Facing the massive Lucanian coalition, the 2,000 Greek mercenaries appeared tiny. Yet, upon reaching 100 meters from the enemy, they suddenly accelerated toward the left flank. Before the Lucanian leaders could react, the Greeks struck the right wing. The disorganized Lucanians panicked under a hail of javelins and a fierce charge, causing the right flank to collapse. Savella cursed the treacherous Greeks for attacking before they were ready. Akebelu realized his mistake. His massive, bloated army was like an ox facing a nimble mouse, lacking the maneuverability to counter the Greeks. Sound the horns. Attack, Akebelu ordered, desperate to surround the Greeks before they escaped. Other leaders echoed the command. The Lucanians surged forward like hounds, eager to tear apart the Greeks who had repeatedly humiliated them. The Greeks turned and fled eastward, discarding shields, spears, and swords to maintain their speed and avoid being overtaken. A miles-long chase ensued. After running 10 miles past the mountain ridge, the Greeks were winded, yet the Lucanians remained close behind. Reaching the Tino River, the Greeks descended onto the flat, soft riverbank. It was easier to run on than the rocky mountain paths. Felicius, over 40, gasped for air, urging his men to hold on as they neared their destination. As the Lucanians crested the final slope, they were met by rows of fully armed Greek hoplites waiting in formation. Ambush, the lead warrior cried, only to be impaled by a Greek spear. Exhausted and unable to dodge, the Lucanians were slaughtered. Behind the Tarentum reinforcements, my mercenaries ate and drank, quickly re-equipping with fresh gear provided by the baggage train, preparing to complete the encirclement. Mercis, knowing time was critical, led 1,000 men, including baggage guards, slaves, and mercenary sergeants, to the narrow mountain pass to block any Lucanian reinforcements. Drax, Adrianx, and Sicida led 1,500 mercenaries along the riverbank, supported by 700 peltasts and 700 armed mine slaves, with me and my guard positioned between the units. Assists rode up, shouting, "Our troops are moving rapidly toward the western pass." I nodded, suppressing my tension. The baiting had worked. Over half the Lucanian coalition was trapped here. With fewer than 5,000 left in their camp, destroying this force would end the threat to the Cyberus plain. Peltasts attack, I commanded. Epitines and Zippite led the peltasts forward, while Alpins ordered the archers and slingers to fire. The Lucanians, jammed into the riverbank, realized too late they were trapped as Greek soldiers appeared on the slopes. Ambush. We're trapped. Javelins, arrows, and stones rained down. Having discarded their armor and shields to chase the Greeks, The Lacanians were defenseless, and every projectile found its mark. Panic ensued. The 9,000 men collided in the narrow space, trampling each other as they tried to flee or fight. Without their hornblowers, the leaders could not restore order. Savella, roaring with rage, led a group toward the slope, hoping to break out. Zipite, spotting Savella, waited for the perfect moment. As Savella slipped, Zipite threw his javelin with a spinning motion, piercing Savella's linothorax. Empty, Savella fell, sliding down the slope. His death didn't stop the others, but the Greek hoplites held the ridge, forming a wall of steel, while peltasts continued their relentless barrage from behind. Drax, at the front of the line, shouted, "Drive them back, brothers!" The soldiers roared in response. Akebelu, the Gramintum great chieftain, had stayed back with 700 guards from Gramintum, Nerulum, and Laos. As they approached the marsh, the sounds of slaughter reached them, and the leaders' faces turned pale. "Speed up," Akebelu ordered. They collided head-on with my mercenaries, who were moving to seal the encirclement. Felicius, seeing the enemy, split his forces. Kapuz would hold the trapped enemies, while he led the rest to engage the newcomers. He sent a messenger to Mercis. "Bring the slaves quickly." Akebelu grew uneasy. The Greeks' confidence in splitting their forces suggested they had a greater plan. "Attack with everything," he commanded. The two elite forces clashed violently. Kapuz's men intercepted the Lacanians fleeing the slope, inflicting heavy casualties and sealing the gap. The Lacanians were now fully surrounded. Tarentum reinforcements to the east, Drax and the peltasts to the north, my hoplites to the west, and the marsh to the south. 9,000 Lacanians were trapped by 7,000 Greeks. The encirclement was thin, especially in the west, but the Lacanians were too disorganized to break out. I relied on my Persian expedition veterans to hold the line. Though the force was split, I had contingency plans. I sent cavalry to urge Mercis to join Felicius and crush the reinforcements before returning to the main encirclement. Time was the deciding factor for both sides. In the battle, the Lacanians were surprised to find the exhausted Greek veterans fighting with superior coordination, cutting them into isolated pockets. Realizing the danger, Akebelu sent a messenger to Sinsing, ordering him to bring the reserves. Late's cavalry intercepted the messengers, but a few wounded ones escaped toward the Lacanian camp. Inform Sinsing, "We're ambushed. Send reinforcements." The survivors cried upon reaching the camp. The warriors there looked at them strangely. "Damn, it's the Vigians," the messenger realized. A man stepped forward. "What ambush? What happened?" The messenger recognized Saru, a Vigian leader. Inside the main tent, Sinsing was discussing the spoils of the Sybaris plain when a guard burst in. "Great chieftain, the Vigians are attacking us." Sinsing roared in fury. "Those damn Vigians. Do they want to die?" He rushed out to find the camp in flames. Vigians were slaughtering the unprepared Pixis warriors. Sinsing screamed for a counterattack, vowing to annihilate the Vigians. Geninate and the other leaders charged out. But the situation was dire. The Vigians had prepared well, and many Pixis warriors were trapped in their burning tents. Chaos reigned. "Captain, look!" a scout shouted. Lades, frustrated by the messengers, watched in disbelief as the enemy camp erupted into internal strife. "It's a mutiny," the scout yelled. Lades confirmed the chaos and sent word to me. The enemy camp was paralyzed. I, unaware of the mutiny, remained worried about the stalemate. Despite their exhaustion and the muddy terrain, the Lacanians charged in waves, their desperation fueling a ferocious resistance that threatened to break the northern line. "Report. Drax has fallen." I was startled. Behind the hoplite line, I sensed a growing, spreading panic among the mercenaries. "Order Arcadus to pull 300 men to support the north," I commanded anxiously. Assists reminded me. "You already gave that order, but Tarentum has no men to spare. They are struggling too." I rubbed my face, feeling the weight of my first independent command. Taking a deep breath to steady myself, I decisively ordered, "Commit the slave unit and the peltasts to the fight." I turned to Marcius and declared, "It's our turn." "Huh." Marcius struck his shield with his sword. The guards, knowing long weapons were useless in the cramped melee, drew their blades and roared. I charged forward, flanked by Marcius's guards. with assists raising the military standard behind me. The high-flying standard halted the mercenaries' retreat and drew the Lacanians toward me, easing pressure on other lines but intensifying the assault on my own. Trumpets blared continuously. Though exhausted from throwing javelins, the peltasts, led by Epitenes and Zippite, raised their leather shields and glaives to plug the gap in the line. The slave soldiers, promised freedom for victory, charged forward shouting, "For freedom!" Driven by adrenaline and the promise of liberty, the untrained slaves pushed the enemy back down the slope. Mercis led another 1,000 slaves in a hammer blow against the enemy's flank. Akebelu and the other chieftains were caught off guard, their small guard unable to withstand the slaves' ferocious assault. Why? Why hasn't Sinsing arrived yet? Akebelu screamed in fury. "Great chieftain, we must retreat or we'll be trapped," his subordinate urged. Akebelu hesitated to abandon his 10,000 men, but cries of "Great chieftain" echoed nearby. Wudel, the Neralim chieftain, had fallen, pierced by multiple spears. Akebelu finally fled west with Tula and a few dozen men, leaving 500 Lacanian warriors to be surrounded. Late's cavalry returned, shouting, "The enemy camp is in chaos. No reinforcements are coming." This news shattered the Lacanians' morale. Caught in a pincer, the remaining warriors were killed or routed. Felicius ordered the slaves and mercenaries to reinforce the western line immediately. The western line was failing, with Capua's thin defenses breached in multiple places. Capua, Antonius, and Alexis joined the front lines, fighting alongside their men despite military regulations forbidding commanders from engaging in direct combat. Felicius's arrival with 2,000 men stabilized the line. After an hour, the Lucanian assault weakened. As the battlefield filled with the dead and dying, the remaining Lacanians fled toward the Tino River and the hot spring marsh, where they drowned or became mired. I seized the moment and ordered the final attack. The Greek army surged forward from all sides. The Lucanian coalition collapsed, with most killed or trapped in the river and marsh. This victory, the Battle of the Great River Beach, saw my 7,500 troops annihilate over 9,000 Lacanians, with only 400 surrendering. The beach was a slaughterhouse. Sinsing and his men, unable to save the camp, fled as it burned to ash. Sidorums and the Vigians slipped away toward the western mountain pass. "Great chieftain, Akebelu will go mad when he sees this," Saru remarked, looking at the burning camp. Sidorums replied worriedly. Even a mad Akebelu could still destroy Vigia. He resented Saru for forcing his hand against Picosis. "Vigia is defensible," Saru countered. "We shouldn't have joined this cursed alliance." "We had no choice," Sidorums sighed. "We lack the supplies and manpower for a prolonged war." "The Lacanian coalition is finished," Saru insisted. "They were ambushed and are begging for reinforcements." "Let's hope so," Sidorums said. "We must return to Vigia, strengthen our defenses, and request aid from Cosentia." "Cosentia?" Saru asked, stunned. "I've realized that as long as the Bruttians fight each other, the Lacanians and Greeks will always oppress us," Sidorums stated firmly. "We should unite with Cosentia, just like the Lacanian alliance," Saru agreed. Sidorums remained silent, lost in thought. Saru then asked, "Should we raid Laos on our way back?" "Are you insane?" Sidorums scolded. "We can barely pass the Lao River safely. Do you want to provoke Avenogis?" He wondered if Thurii had received reinforcements from Tarentum or Croton to pull off such an ambush. Sidorums watched the smoke, sensing a massive shift in the region's power. Sinsing, meanwhile, retreated east, consumed by a singular desire for vengeance against the Vigians. They encountered Akebelu's retreating forces on the road. Akebelu, hoping to rally reinforcements, collapsed upon hearing from Sinsing that the camp was destroyed and the Vigians had betrayed them. Sinsing was equally devastated to learn the main army had been decimated in an ambush. At Thurii, sentries reported large troop movements outside the city. By morning, scouts confirmed the mercenary camp was nearly empty. The generals were furious, realizing the mercenaries had broken their word and fled after the city had spent all night gathering supplies for them. The generals cursed the mercenaries, with some proposing to send warships to hunt them down and force their return. Scouts returned from the west. "What? The mercenaries and Tarentum reinforcements are attacking the Lacanian allied army. Cunagurata was stunned. The city hall erupted. Niansis cursed. I am a madman, gambling Thuriai's future. Polixenes added. Without the mercenaries, we are defenseless against the Lacanians. Cunagurata ordered Burkos to bring the mercenaries back at any cost, forbidding them from acting recklessly. Burkos failed. I firmly rejected the order and sent him away, telling him to wait for news of victory. Burkos tried to reassure the generals of my confidence, though he remained skeptical himself. The generals berated him for his poor judgment. Polixenes complained that the mercenaries were untrustworthy wolves. Niansis threatened to impeach Burkos for wasting the national treasury on useless mercenaries. The generals spent the morning in anxious resentment, lacking the courage to deploy their own 2,000 citizen soldiers. That afternoon, scouts reported the mercenaries returning. They were bloodied but triumphant, laden with spoils and hundreds of prisoners. The scouts realized the impossible had happened. A cavalryman approached the scouts with hands raised. He declared, I have destroyed the Lacanian allied army at the riverbank. They are driven from our territory. The scouts asked, trembling, is it true? The rider pointed to the captives and added, clear the corpses at the riverbank to prevent a plague. The scouts raced back, shouting, victory! The Lacanians are annihilated. The generals were exhausted from their long, anxious wait. Outside, cheers grew louder, rousing the sleeping generals. What is happening? Niansis asked. A guard burst in, ecstatic. The scouts report the mercenaries won. The Lacanian coalition is destroyed. Is it true? The generals asked in unison. The scouts saw the riverbank. It is covered in Lacanian corpses. Incredible, Niansis murmured, as if dreaming. Cunagurata, having faced the Lacanians, found this miracle hard to fathom. Ansitanos grew curious about this mysterious leader. Polixenes recalled the smiling young man who had saved their city. Burkos proudly recounted rumors of me being a god-favorite of Hades, a miracle worker. The generals, moved by the news, strode out of the hall. The plaza was filled with weeping, cheering citizens. The shadow of fear had lifted. The scouts repeated my warning about the corpses and the plague. Niansis led a party to the riverbank. The sight of the carnage left him trembling. A terrifying miracle. A terrifying god-favorite of Hades. To show gratitude, the council sent Burkos and Ansitanos to invite me, Archytas, and their officers to a victory celebration, bringing wine and oil as rewards. Guards blocked them at the camp, stating the exhausted troops were sleeping and no one was permitted entry. Burkos, knowing the strict discipline, had to retreat. They sought out Archytas instead. Archytas declined, stating the victory belonged to my genius, and he would not attend without me. Ansitanos decided to try again tomorrow. Meanwhile, the officers gathered in my tent. I laughed at the report. Thuriai treated us like thieves. Now they want to curry favor. A bit late, isn't it? Amyntas sneered. We didn't destroy the Lacanians for them. Oliverus joked. A pity to miss the celebration. The Thurian maidens might have been waiting for you. I smiled. Would you like to take my place? I can't. Oliverus shook his head, laughing. Thuriai invited the legendary Davos, not a nobody like me. I'll stick to sleeping in camp. Leader, we must maintain good relations with Thuriai. They will be our neighbors, Felicius reminded me. I nodded, turning to Adrianx and Sicida. How is Drax? Hirpulici's treatment is working, Sicida replied gratefully. He even told us to follow your orders. I acknowledged the gesture of loyalty. Good, we cannot lose a warrior like him. His defense of the front line saved us. Now, listen to the battle plan. The group fell silent, focusing intently on me. I pointed to a clay model of a city on the table. At 2 a.m., we march for Amandalera. Once we cross the Cisno River, Silas, it's on you. Understood. Don't let our training go to waste. Rest assured, Silas declared. My men will scale the walls with grappling hooks and open the gates in no time. I nodded. If we are detected, Capus and Antonius will bring ladders, and Alexis will use the battering ram for a direct assault. Understood, the three replied. Once the gates open, Amyntas, your company leads the charge to break their lines. Finally, Amyntas grinned. Follow the guides to the summit, I instructed, pointing to the model. The Senate, the plaza, and the temple are the likely locations for the Lacanian barracks and prisoners. Capture them immediately. Understood. As they shouted, Alexis asked, "When do we light the torches?" Good question, I mused. Light them once the gates open, or if we switch to a direct assault. Listen, Thurii may ask for our help tomorrow, or the Lacanians might flee. We must seize Amandalra tonight to make it our own spoils of war. Failure is not an option. Wisaba never expected such a turn of events. After the Lacanian coalition retreated, Wisaba waited for them to regroup. Instead, scouts reported the Greek mercenaries had annihilated the Lacanian army at the Tino River. Terrified, Wisaba wanted to flee, but he couldn't bear to abandon the massive stockpile of loot in the city. A scout added that the Greeks had suffered over 1,000 casualties. Realizing the Greeks might be too exhausted to pursue, Wisaba ordered his people to pack the supplies for transport. By nightfall, the tribe was exhausted and fell into a deep sleep. This delay would become a legendary tale of fortune for his descendants. Under the moonlight, the night was still. A long column of soldiers moved silently toward the coast, crossing the Sybaris and Saraceno rivers with increasing speed until they reached the Cisno. The soldiers gazed at the silhouette of Amandalra, hearts pounding. I took a breath and signaled Silas. The attack began. Meanwhile, Wisaba dreamt of a peaceful life in the city until a guard burst in. "Great chieftain, the Greeks have breached the city." "What?" Wisaba woke in a panic. The next morning, Archidus discovered the neighboring mercenaries had vanished. He went to investigate. The camp was mostly baggage, wounded, and slaves. He grabbed Mercis. "Where is Davos?" Mercis stammered, fueling his suspicion. A familiar voice called out, "Archidus, apologies for the delay." Archidus turned to see a weary but cheerful me. "Where are your men?" "Good news," I said, dismounting. "We took Amandalra." "When?" Archidus gasped. "Last night." Archidus was stunned. Taking a mountain city in one night was nearly impossible. Impressed by my leadership and tactical genius, he admitted, "You've done the impossible again." "I'm jealous." I laughed. Fate was on our side. The Lacanians were careless. "I see," Archidus said, but I turned serious. "I need your support, and that of Tarentum." Archidus was stunned by the seriousness in my expression. I stared at him, stating firmly, "Our mercenaries wish to become citizens of Amandalra." Archidus was taken aback. "All of you? Are you serious?" "It is the will of the entire mercenary force," I declared. Archidus looked around, seeing Mercis, assists, and the guards watching with hopeful eyes. He turned back to me, saying, "It seems your capture of Amandalra was no mere whim." I replied emotionally, "You were born a Tarentum noble. You cannot fathom the life of a wandering mercenary. A home is their greatest desire." Archidus asked, "Does Marcellus, the Archon of Amandalra, agree?" I spoke heavily. Marcellus died shortly after the Lacanians occupied the city. Last night, as we attacked, the citizens led by the other Archon, Gratbaflo, rose up against their captors. By the time we arrived, Gratbaflo and several senators were already dead. I continued, "Only about 1,000 citizens remain, mostly elderly or wounded. They cannot manage or defend this mountain city alone." Archidus realized I intended to rule the city. He deflected, "You should consult Thurii, as Amandalra is their ally." "Thurii is too weakened by its defeats to protect this city," I argued. "We can hold it, and we are willing to ally with Tarentum to ensure the safety of this region and protect Heraclea from the natives." Swayed by the prospect of regional security, Archidus said, "I cannot decide this alone. It requires the Tarentum Senate's approval. Send a representative with my messenger to Tarentum to state your case." "Thank you, Archidus," I exclaimed. "My only regret is that you can no longer become a Tarentum citizen," Archidus said sincerely. I was moved, replying, "We shall be allies, and perhaps we will fight side by side again." Without consulting the citizens of Amandalra or their allies in Thurii, the two men decided the fate of the city. Thurii held its victory celebration, temporarily setting aside its grief. Ansitanos, having slept off a night of heavy drinking, arrived at the empty mercenary camp at noon. He learned from the remaining Tarentum reinforcements that the mercenaries had moved to Amandalra. The news that the mercenaries had seized Amendolara shocked Ansetanos and Burkos. As they hurried north, Ansetanos suddenly ordered the group to turn back. "Why, General?" Burkos asked. Ansetanos sighed. "They moved their slaves and supplies into the city immediately." "What does that imply?" Burkos gasped. "They intend to occupy Amendolara. And Arcadis is there too," Ansetanos added gloomily. Burkos realized, does Tarentum support this? "Perhaps it is only Arcadis' personal wish," Ansetanos said, though he worried. "If Tarentum supports them, can Thurii refuse? They are our heroes, but Tarentum's influence now reaches the Cyberus plane. What do we do?" Burkos asked anxiously. "Return and devise a strategy," Ansetanos said, though he clearly felt helpless against the mercenaries' fait accompli. He muttered to himself, "Thurii has fallen so far in 6 months. We lack military talents like Davos and Arcadis." Burkos realized I had likely planned this since my initial scouting mission. It wasn't just luck, it was the result of my calculated efforts. Burkos felt a mix of resentment and awe as he considered the mercenary occupation. Meanwhile, I accompanied Arcadis on a tour of Amendolara. Arcadis listened to the account of the battle and inspected the attack route, showing interest in the grappling hooks. Seeing the heavily guarded city, Arcadis advised, "Davos, to rule here successfully, you should seek the consent of the citizens." "Understood," I replied. Sensing my indifference, Arcadis warned, "A city needs laws and traditions to thrive. If you start by subverting them, you are like a tree planted crooked. It will never grow into a great, sturdy oak."